What if the real danger of the Necronomicon isn't summoning ancient entities, but something far more insidious? Something within ourselves? The Necronomicon is more than just a book. It's a psychological trigger, a gateway to the darkest corners of the human mind. A mind trap masked as forbidden knowledge, ready to spring, though H.P. Lovecraft conceived the Necronomicon as a work of fiction. Its reputation as the most dangerous book in the world has taken on a life of its own. Tales abound of its forbidden rituals, the unspeakable entities it describes, and the madness it inflicts upon those who dare to delve into its pages. Allegedly connected to historical occult practices and traditions, the Necronomicon has become more than just a story. It is a self-fulfilling prophecy written in the minds of the unstable, a tome whose real danger lies not in ink and parchment, but in the fractured psyches it attracts. In this video, we'll explore the Necronomicon's alleged influence on chaos magic, demonolatry, and other occult traditions. And we will expose the psychological dangers of delving into forbidden knowledge, including the potential for delusion, paranoia, and utter loss of control. We'll examine a specific fictional case study of someone whose life unravels as a result of their obsession with the Necronomicon. We will show how this dark grimoire acts as a mirror reflecting the shadow self and a tool for self-destruction. Stick around until the end to discover the truth about the Necronomicon's true dangers and the fatal mistake that could doom anyone who seeks it. The core argument of this video is that the Necronomicon's danger lies not necessarily in supernatural forces, but in its potent psychological impact and its ability to unlock destructive ideas and behaviors in those who are unprepared or unbalanced. Our purpose is to go beyond the book's fictional origins and examine its alleged real-world influences and the potential dangers it represents to the human mind. It's easy to dismiss the Necronomicon as mere fiction, a product of Lovecraft's fertile imagination. However, the book's enduring appeal speaks to the universal human fascination with the occult, forbidden knowledge, and the darker aspects of the human psyche. The themes explored in the Necronomicon madness, obsession, the allure of the unknown are deeply relevant to our understanding of human nature and the dangers of unchecked ambition. The warnings associated with the Necronomicon are not external threats, but rather reflections of internal vulnerabilities. The book acts as a mirror, revealing what may already be present within. Let's begin our descent. Prepare yourself for the unsettling truths we are about to discover, but the darkness doesn't end there. The Necronomicon is more than a fictional object. It's a potential catalyst for psychological breakdown in the real world. In this section, we will examine a fictionalized, yet plausible, case study of an individual whose obsession with the Necronomicon leads to disastrous consequences. We will expose how cognitive distortions play a key role in their downfall, and hint at the disturbing possibility that the Necronomicon's power lies not in external forces, but in its ability to amplify pre-existing psychological vulnerabilities. Prepare yourself for a cautionary exploration of the dark side of human psychology and the dangers of unchecked obsession, for what we are about to uncover is not for the faint of heart. Throughout history, certain books have been feared and even censored for their perceived power to corrupt or destabilize individuals and societies. From the Malleus Maleficarum, used to justify the persecution of witches, to Mein Kampf, which fueled the horrors of the Nazi regime, the written word has often been seen as a dangerous weapon. Similarly, spiritual and psychological theories have long explored the power of belief and the impact of ideas on human behavior. Hypnosis, suggestion, and even the placebo effect demonstrate the profound influence that our minds can have on our reality. Ancient cultures also approach the concept of madness and the occult with a mixture of fear and reverence. Shamans and oracles were often seen as conduits to other realms, but also as individuals vulnerable to psychological disturbances. This historical precedent sets the stage for understanding the psychological impact that the Necronomicon is said to hold, fitting into pre-existing mental frameworks about the power of thought and the fragility of the human mind. To understand how the Necronomicon might trigger such a descent, we must first explore the concept of cognitive distortions. Cognitive distortions are essentially biased or irrational thought patterns that can lead to inaccurate perceptions of reality. Common types include catastrophizing, where individuals exaggerate the severity of a situation; black and white thinking, where things are seen as either all good or all bad with no middle ground; and confirmation bias, where individuals selectively focus on information that confirms their existing beliefs while ignoring contradictory evidence. These distortions can lead to irrational fears, exaggerated beliefs, and maladaptive behaviors, creating a fertile ground for the Necronomicon's influence to take root. But here's what most people miss. These distortions can be amplified and reinforced by the themes and ideas presented in the Necronomicon, creating a dangerous feedback loop that spirals into madness. The Necronomicon, steeped in tales of ancient entities and forbidden rituals, can also fuel magical thinking, a type of cognitive distortion where individuals believe that their thoughts or actions can influence events in the external world without any logical connection. This can blur the lines between fantasy and reality, especially in individuals prone to delusion or paranoia. While logical thought relies on empirical evidence and rational analysis, magical thinking replaces logic with superstition and unfounded beliefs. This is why these ideas are so dangerous, because the Necronomicon, through the lens of magical thinking, can transform from a work of fiction into a self-fulfilling prophecy, especially for those with pre-existing psychological vulnerabilities. Consider the fictional case of Elias Thorne, a young academic with a brilliant mind but a history of anxiety and social isolation. Elias stumbled upon an online copy of the Necronomicon during his research into obscure occult texts. Initially, he was drawn to the book's intricate mythology and its promise of hidden knowledge. However, as he delved deeper into its pages, Elias began to exhibit signs of cognitive distortions and magical thinking. For example, he started catastrophizing minor setbacks, interpreting them as evidence of a malevolent force working against him, fueled by the entities described in the Necronomicon. His pre-existing social anxieties were amplified by the book's themes of isolation and cosmic indifference, leading him to believe that he was surrounded by enemies and that no one could be trusted. Elias' interpretation of the Necronomicon became increasingly shaped by his pre-existing biases and vulnerabilities. Passages describing ancient rituals, he believed, contained secret codes to unlocking hidden dimensions. The descriptions of monstrous entities, he imagined, were warnings about the true nature of reality, a reality that was hostile and chaotic. Even seemingly neutral passages were twisted to fit his growing paranoia. For instance, the phrase, "that is not dead which can eternal lie," and with strange eons even death may die became, in his mind, a confirmation that the universe was governed by immortal, malevolent beings beyond human comprehension. As Elias' obsession deepened, he became increasingly isolated from his friends and family. He spent countless hours studying the Necronomicon, neglecting his work and personal hygiene. He began to see patterns and connections that weren't there, weaving elaborate conspiracy theories and detaching himself from reality. His apartment transformed into a shrine to the Necronomicon, filled with strange symbols and homemade talismans intended to ward off evil spirits. His friends, noticing his deteriorating mental state, tried to intervene, urging him to seek professional help. But Elias, convinced that they were part of the conspiracy, dismissed their concerns, further solidifying his isolation. They tried to help him, but his mind was too far gone to save. Ultimately, Elias' obsession with the Necronomicon culminated in a complete psychological breakdown. Believing that he was about to be attacked by demonic forces, he barricaded himself in his apartment, performing elaborate rituals in a desperate attempt to protect himself. When the police finally broke down the door, they found him incoherent and delusional, surrounded by occult paraphernalia. Elias was committed to a psychiatric facility, where he remains to this day, trapped in a world of his own making, a tragic victim of his unchecked obsession. His case stands as a grim warning about the potential dangers of forbidden knowledge and the fragility of the human mind. Elia's tragic story illustrates how the Necronomicon functions as a Rorschach test, projecting the pre-existing fears and desires of the reader. His interpretation of the book was not based on its literal content, but rather on his own psychological vulnerabilities. The Necronomicon simply provided a framework for his paranoia and magical thinking to take root and flourish. This highlights a crucial point. The Necronomicon's danger lies not in its objective reality, but in its subjective interpretation. The book acts as a mirror, reflecting the darker aspects of the human psyche and amplifying existing psychological predispositions. Moreover, Elia's belief in the Necronomicon's power became a self-fulfilling prophecy. The more he believed in its influence, the more he acted in ways that confirmed his beliefs, further reinforcing his delusions. This demonstrates the powerful relationship between belief, expectation, and reality. What began as a mere intellectual curiosity transformed into a destructive obsession, ultimately leading to his downfall. The more he sought control, the more control he ultimately lost, surrendering to the darkness within his own mind. However, it's important to acknowledge that Elia's case is fictionalized, and that not everyone who reads the Necronomicon will experience such disastrous consequences. Critical thinking, media literacy, and a healthy dose of skepticism are essential tools for navigating esoteric topics. Some individuals may even find the Necronomicon to be a source of inspiration or creative expression, without succumbing to its psychological dangers. Individual differences in susceptibility to psychological manipulation, as well as pre-existing mental health conditions, play a significant role in determining the impact of such material. A healthy sense of escapism is very different than harmful obsession. Despite these counterarguments, the core point remains. The Necronomicon's primary danger lies not in supernatural forces, but in its ability to trigger and amplify pre-existing psychological vulnerabilities. Elia's downfall serves as a stark reminder of the role of cognitive distortions, magical thinking, and self-fulfilling prophecies. It reinforces the importance of approaching esoteric topics with caution, critical thinking, and a healthy dose of skepticism. The Necronomicon is not inherently dangerous, but it can be a dangerous tool in the hands of someone who is unprepared or unbalanced. Mental health is not something to be taken lightly, and there are real dangers when one is not in a stable state of mind. But the darkness doesn't end there. The story of Elia's thorn demonstrates how the Necronomicon can act as a mirror, reflecting the darker aspects of the human psyche. But what happens when we confront these shadows? And what is the link between these shadows and the abyss? The story of Elia's thorn highlighted how the Necronomicon can act as a mirror, reflecting the darker aspects of the human psyche, but it also raises a deeper question. What is the nature of this darkness, and how can we understand its influence? This leads us to the Jungian concept of the shadow, a powerful archetype that can help us explore the hidden recesses of the human psyche and the risks associated with delving too deep without the necessary tools or support. In this section, we will dissect the Jungian concept of the shadow, explaining its nature and its intricate relationship to the Necronomicon, and why it acts as a symbolic representation of repressed desires, fears, and traumas. Be warned, however, that confronting the shadow without proper guidance or preparation can lead to psychological imbalance and potential harm as we peel back the layers of the human psyche. To understand the shadow, we must first briefly explore the work of Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist who developed analytical psychology. Jung, a contemporary of Sigmund Freud, placed a strong emphasis on the unconscious mind and its profound influence on human behavior. Unlike Freud, who primarily focused on the role of repressed sexual desires, Jung explored a broader range of unconscious influences, including mythology, alchemy, and the occult. It was from these explorations that the concept of the shadow emerged, representing the darker, more primitive aspects of the human psyche. But how does this fit in with other psychological theories? Other psychological theories, such as those related to the id or the dark side of personality, explore similar concepts, focusing on the unconscious drives and impulses that can lead to destructive behavior. This psychological model, however, differs significantly from traditional religious views of evil, which often attribute negative behavior to external forces or supernatural entities. But what exactly is the Jungian shadow? The shadow is defined as the unconscious aspect of the personality that embodies repressed ideas, weaknesses, desires, instincts, and shortcomings. It is the sum total of all the things we dislike, deny, or disown about ourselves. It is not inherently evil, but rather a neutral force that can manifest in both positive and negative ways, depending on how it is integrated into the conscious personality. Repressing the shadow can lead to projection, where we attribute our own unacceptable qualities to others. Denial, where we refuse to acknowledge our own flaws. And unconscious acting out of negative impulses, where we engage in destructive behaviors without understanding why. The opposite of repression is shadow work, which involves consciously acknowledging and integrating the shadow into the personality in a healthy and constructive way, and it is this aspect that is most important to explore. One must understand the crucial difference between direct confrontation and integration. Direct confrontation without understanding or preparation can be devastating, akin to stirring up a hornet's nest. Integration, on the other hand, is a gradual process of understanding, accepting, and ultimately incorporating these darker aspects into a more complete sense of self. So, how does the shadow manifest in everyday life? We can see its influence in prejudice, where we project our own feelings of inadequacy onto others. In aggression, where we act out our repressed anger and frustration. In self-sabotage, where we undermine our own success. And in addictive behaviors, where we seek to numb our pain and escape our insecurities. But what about the Necronomicon? The monsters and entities described in the Necronomicon might be interpreted as symbolic representations of repressed desires, fears, and traumas. For example, the monstrous Cthulhu could represent the overwhelming power of the unconscious, while the grotesque Shoggoths could symbolize the formless, chaotic aspects of the shadow. And how does this book act as a trigger for bringing the shadow to the surface? The Necronomicon can act as a catalyst for bringing the shadow to the surface, particularly in individuals who are already prone to psychological imbalance or instability. Its themes of forbidden knowledge, ancient evils, and cosmic indifference can resonate with the darker aspects of the human psyche, triggering repressed fears and desires. In mythology and folklore, we see numerous examples of characters who are confronted with their shadow selves, highlighting the potential consequences of both successful and unsuccessful integration. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, for example, represent the struggle between the conscious and unconscious mind, with Hyde embodying the repressed shadow of Jekyll. We can now begin to analyze how the Necronomicon's warnings about forbidden knowledge can be interpreted as cautionary tales about the dangers of confronting the shadow without proper guidance or preparation. The book's themes of madness, obsession, and loss of control can be seen as manifestations of a shadow that has been unleashed and left unchecked. Elias Thorne's experiences can be understood as a case of shadow projection and acting out, with the Necronomicon serving as a catalyst for his psychological disintegration. However, it's important to not only focus on the negative, but to also discuss the potential benefits of engaging in shadow work. Increased self-awareness, emotional maturity, and creativity are among the benefits of engaging in shadow work. Ultimately, the deeper meanings behind the shadow archetype highlight its connection to themes of duality, transformation, and the search for wholeness. The shadow is not simply a repository of negative traits, but rather an essential part of the human experience. However, we must acknowledge that the concept of the shadow is a complex and subjective one, with different interpretations and approaches within Jungian psychology. There is also the potential for misinterpreting or misusing shadow work, leading to self-indulgence, narcissism, or further psychological imbalance. Simply wallowing in negative emotions or engaging in self-destructive behaviors is not shadow work. It is simply indulging the shadow. It is also worth noting that not everyone who engages with the Necronomicon will experience a negative shadow encounter, and that some individuals may find it to be a source of personal growth or creative inspiration. Individual differences in susceptibility to psychological manipulation, as well as pre-existing mental health conditions, play a significant role in determining the impact of such material. So how can someone safely work with their shadow to benefit from it? The answer lies in seeking guidance from a qualified therapist or counselor when engaging in shadow work, particularly for individuals with pre-existing mental health conditions. A trained professional can provide a safe and supportive environment for exploring the darker aspects of the psyche, helping individuals to integrate their shadow in a healthy and constructive way. Despite these counterarguments, the core argument remains. The Necronomicon's danger lies not necessarily in supernatural forces, but in its potent psychological impact, particularly its ability to trigger and amplify the shadow. We can see that the nature of the shadow, its connection to the Necronomicon, and the potential dangers of confronting it, unprepared, all reinforce the idea that self-awareness, emotional maturity, and seeking professional guidance are all necessary when exploring the darker aspects of the human psyche. While the Necronomicon is not inherently evil, it can be a dangerous tool for those who are not equipped to handle its psychological power. But shadow work is a long-term, lifelong journey. But there is a way to protect yourself. As we've seen, the Necronomicon acts as a mirror, reflecting the shadow, and those who are unprepared may find themselves overwhelmed by its darkness. But what is the answer? Is knowledge of the Necronomicon power or an illusion of power, and what happens when the ego inflates? But what is the answer? Is knowledge of the Necronomicon power or an illusion of power, and what happens when the ego inflates? We have witnessed how the Necronomicon acts as a mirror, reflecting the shadow, and those who are unprepared may find themselves overwhelmed by its darkness. In this section, we explore the potential for individuals to misinterpret the Necronomicon as offering absolute power, when in reality it may only lead to a loss of control and a descent into madness. The allure of forbidden knowledge can be intoxicating, but it can also blind us to the importance of humility and ethical considerations. Prepare yourself, for we are about to descend into a cautionary tale about the allure of power and the potential for self-destruction when ambition is unchecked, and the ego is left to swell beyond control. Throughout history, there have been countless figures who sought forbidden knowledge or power, only to suffer disastrous consequences due to their own hubris. Consider Icarus, from Greek mythology, who flew too close to the sun with wings made of wax, ignoring his father's warnings and ultimately plummeting to his death. Or Faust, from German folklore, who made a pact with the devil in exchange for unlimited knowledge and pleasure, only to realize the emptiness of his bargain and face eternal damnation. Ancient Greek philosophy viewed hubris, or excessive pride, as a grave moral failing, one that inevitably led to downfall. This concept permeates religious texts as well. The Bible warns against pride, stating that pride goes before destruction and a haughty spirit before a fall, Proverbs 16:18. Literary works such as Shakespeare's tragedies also explore the theme of hubris, with characters like Macbeth and King Lear driven to ruin by their own ambition and arrogance. Even in modern psychology, the concepts of ego and power dynamics play a crucial role, connecting directly to these historical examples. We see the consequences of unchecked ambition and inflated egos in various aspects of life. Ego inflation can be defined as an exaggerated sense of self-importance, power, or ability, often accompanied by a distorted perception of reality and a lack of empathy for others. It is a psychological state in which an individual's ego becomes overblown, leading them to believe they are superior to others, invulnerable to harm, and capable of achieving anything they desire. This inflated sense of self can lead to poor decision-making, as individuals overestimate their abilities and underestimate the risks involved in their actions. It can also result in reckless behavior, as they become willing to take extreme measures to achieve their goals, regardless of the consequences. Ethical considerations are often disregarded, as individuals prioritize their own desires above all else. Several psychological mechanisms can contribute to ego inflation, including narcissism, grandiosity, and a need for external validation. Narcissistic individuals often possess an inflated sense of self-worth and a need for admiration from others. Grandiosity involves unrealistic beliefs about one's own abilities and accomplishments, and the need for external validation can drive individuals to seek constant praise and recognition in order to maintain their inflated ego. This is particularly dangerous in the context of esoteric or occult practices, where individuals may believe they have access to supernatural powers or hidden knowledge, leading them to feel invincible and above the laws of nature. A healthy ego, on the other hand, is grounded in reality, self-aware, and respectful of others. Consider Aleister Crowley, the infamous English occultist who proclaimed himself the Great Beast 666, and believed he had attained godlike powers through his magical practices. Crowley's ego inflation led him to engage in increasingly reckless and self-destructive behavior, alienating his followers and ultimately dying in poverty and isolation. Grigory Rasputin, the Russian mystic who gained influence over the Romanov family, believed he possessed supernatural abilities that made him indispensable to the Tsar and Tsarina. Rasputin's inflated ego led him to meddle in political affairs and engage in scandalous behavior, contributing to the downfall of the Romanov dynasty. In literature, we see examples of characters corrupted by power, such as Lord Voldemort in the Harry Potter series, who seeks immortality and control over the wizarding world, but ultimately destroys himself through his own arrogance and cruelty. Shakespeare's Macbeth is another example, driven by ambition and the prophecies of the witches to commit murder and seize the throne, only to descend into paranoia and madness. Returning to Elias Thorne, we can see how his experiences can be understood as a case of ego inflation. His belief in the Necronomicon's power led to a distorted perception of reality and a loss of control. Consider the following passage from the Necronomicon, interpreted by Thorne. I am the master of my own destiny, the architect of my own reality. The stars align to my will, and the ancient ones tremble before my power. This language, twisted to support delusions of grandeur and power, fueled Thorne's ego inflation, leading him down a path of self-destruction. Imagine, for a moment, someone questioning Crowley, or a friend warning Rasputin, or the chance Thorne had to stop his descent. Each moment ignored was a step closer to the abyss. The Necronomicon, therefore, can easily be misinterpreted as offering absolute power or access to forbidden knowledge, leading to a sense of superiority and entitlement in those who are already prone to ego inflation. The book's cryptic language and disturbing imagery can be twisted to support grandiose delusions, as individuals project their own desires and fantasies onto its pages. The themes of madness, chaos, and cosmic indifference can be seen as a reflection of the psychological state of someone who has lost touch with reality due to ego inflation. Such individuals may identify with the book's nihilistic worldview, using it to justify their own destructive behaviors and to rationalize their disregard for ethical considerations. The potential exists for individuals to use the Necronomicon to justify their own destructive behaviors or to manipulate others, leading to harmful consequences. They may believe they are acting on behalf of some higher power or cosmic force, absolving themselves of responsibility for their actions. They may also use the book's imagery and symbolism to intimidate or control others, creating a cult of personality around themselves. Ultimately, the pursuit of power, as reflected in the distorted mirror of the Necronomicon, suggests that true power comes not from external sources, but from inner strength, self-awareness, and ethical integrity. Elias Thorne, in the end, succumbed to the false promises of the Necronomicon, his ego inflated beyond repair, leaving him a shattered husk of his former self. However, it is important to acknowledge that not everyone who seeks knowledge or power will succumb to ego inflation, and that some individuals may be able to use their abilities for positive purposes. Humility, self-awareness, and ethical considerations are crucial in approaching esoteric topics, highlighting the need for responsible use of knowledge and power. Some individuals may find the Necronomicon to be a source of empowerment or inspiration, without succumbing to its psychological dangers. Seeking guidance from a qualified mentor or teacher when exploring esoteric practices is also important, particularly for individuals who are prone to ego inflation or psychological instability. Balance is required to work with these forces, lest they consume you. Despite these counterarguments, the video's core argument remains. The Necronomicon's danger lies not necessarily in supernatural forces, but in its potent psychological impact, particularly its ability to trigger ego inflation and a loss of control. We can see that the dangers of hubris, the importance of humility, and the need for ethical considerations in approaching esoteric topics all underscore the idea that true power comes from within, and that the pursuit of external power can lead to self-destruction. The Necronomicon is not inherently evil, but it can be a dangerous tool for those who seek power without the necessary self-awareness or ethical framework. Understanding oneself is key to safely engaging with these ideas. But what if this is all intentional? What if the danger isn't the Necronomicon itself, but the minds that shaped it? We've discussed the dangers of ego inflation and that those unprepared may destroy themselves. But if there is no real power to be gained, then why do people seek it? Is it possible the Necronomicon has real-world influences? But the influence of the Necronomicon doesn't end with individual psychology. Its tendrils reach into the shadowy corners of esoteric communities, blurring the lines between fiction and reality. Is the danger solely within the individual, or does the Necronomicon gain a life of its own, influencing real-world occult practices and belief systems? Even though it is a work of fiction, the Necronomicon has gained a strange sort of validity, inspiring occultists, artists, and even shaping certain schools of thought. Consider the esoteric idea of egregore, a thought form or collective consciousness created by shared belief, which suggests that the more people believe in something, the more real it becomes on some level. The Necronomicon, despite its fictional origins, may have manifested as an egregore, fueled by the collective imagination of countless readers. The question is, can a fictional book become dangerously real to those who believe in it? We must explore the power of shared belief and the dynamics of esoteric communities to understand where the true danger lies. Throughout history, fictional works have often served as catalysts for real-world movements and subcultures, demonstrating the potent influence of imagination on human behavior. Consider the impact of J.R.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings, which sparked a revival of interest in fantasy literature and medieval mythology, leading to the creation of countless fan communities, role-playing games, and even neo-pagan belief systems. Or consider the impact of films like The Matrix, its philosophical concepts sparking intense debate and influencing contemporary views on reality, simulation theory, and technological determinism. These examples highlight how fictional narratives can capture the imagination and inspire individuals to create their own realities, sometimes blurring the lines between fantasy and lived experience. But it goes deeper. Belief systems based on imagination can be as powerful, and sometimes more so, than those based on traditional faith. This is because the former often allows for greater flexibility and personal interpretation, fostering a sense of individual empowerment and creative exploration. In cult-like organizations, this phenomenon is amplified, as charismatic leaders can exploit the power of shared belief to manipulate and control their followers. It is crucial to recognize that in certain contexts, the boundary between reality and fiction can become dangerously porous, particularly when individuals are seeking meaning, purpose, or power. This leads us to a contemporary occult practice that exemplifies this phenomenon: chaos magic. Chaos magic can be defined as a contemporary occult practice that emphasizes the power of belief to shape reality and the integration of various belief systems and mythologies. It is an approach to magic that discards traditional dogma and rigid structures, embracing instead a pragmatic and experimental approach to achieving desired outcomes. The core tenets of chaos magic include the use of sigils, symbolic representations of intent, rituals, and altered states of consciousness to bypass the rational mind and directly influence reality. Practitioners often draw upon a wide range of sources, including ancient mythology, modern science, pop culture, and personal experience, to create their own unique magical systems. One of the key concepts in chaos magic is the idea that belief is a tool, not a fixed truth. Practitioners can adopt and discard belief systems as needed, using them as temporary frameworks for achieving specific goals. This approach stands in stark contrast to more traditional occult practices, which often adhere to strict rules, hierarchies, and established traditions. It is often thought of as the build-your-own adventure of occult practices. The pragmatic approach to chaos magic is what separates it from other traditions. It's about what works, not what is necessarily true. For instance, a chaos magic practitioner might use a sigil based on a corporate logo to attract wealth, or invoke a fictional character from a video game to gain courage. The effectiveness of these techniques is attributed to the practitioner's focused intent and the psychological impact of the symbols and rituals themselves. One can view it as a form of applied psychological conditioning, where belief acts as a catalyst for achieving desired outcomes. This perspective suggests that the power of magic lies not in external forces, but in the human mind's ability to shape its own reality. But how does the Necronomicon fit into all of this? Within chaos magic, we see that practitioners frequently incorporate elements from the Necronomicon or other fictional sources into their rituals and practices. They might invoke fictional entities like Cthulhu or Azathoth, use fictional symbols from the Necronomicon as sigils, or create entire magical systems based on the book's cosmology. Some individuals or groups within the chaos magic community have openly embraced the Necronomicon as a source of inspiration or magical power, viewing it as a grimoire of hidden knowledge or a gateway to other dimensions. There are even anecdotes, often fictionalized or embellished, of individuals who have experienced tangible results from using chaos magic techniques based on Necronomicon concepts, such as improved creativity, enhanced psychic abilities, or even altered states of consciousness. The use of pop culture is also rampant in chaos magic. Practitioners create spells based on Star Wars, comic books, and other popular franchises, drawing upon the collective energy and symbolism associated with these cultural phenomena. This is not unlike the approach to the Necronomicon. Fictional constructs become powerful tools for shaping reality through belief and intent. But the question remains, what are the implications of such an approach to belief and reality? This approach to belief and reality, as seen in chaos magic, has potential benefits and risks. On one hand, it can be a powerful tool for personal empowerment, self-discovery, and creative expression. By consciously choosing and manipulating their beliefs, practitioners can break free from limiting patterns of thought and behavior, unlocking their full potential. The Necronomicon, in this context, functions as a symbolic representation of the unconscious mind, the shadow, or other psychological concepts. It can serve as a catalyst for exploring the darker aspects of the psyche, confronting repressed fears and desires, and integrating these elements into a more complete sense of self. However, the potential for ego inflation and shadow work come into play when practitioners believe that their beliefs can change reality. The line can be blurred between healthy self-belief and delusional grandiosity, leading to harmful consequences. As we discussed earlier, ego inflation can distort one's perception of reality and lead to reckless behavior, while unchecked shadow work can unleash destructive forces that one is not prepared to handle. But is this all just a game? Is chaos magic simply a form of imaginative play or psychological self-help? It is crucial to acknowledge that chaos magic is a controversial and often misunderstood practice. Critics argue that its lack of structure and tradition makes it inherently dangerous or irresponsible, potentially leading to delusion, addiction, or manipulation. The argument of reality versus placebo is also relevant here. Are the effects experienced by chaos magic practitioners simply the result of suggestion and psychological conditioning, or is there something more at play? Do these rituals really manifest change, or is that simply a product of the mind? It is difficult to say definitively, as the subjective nature of magical experience makes it challenging to conduct rigorous scientific studies. However, the importance of belief cannot be overstated. One has to believe to see effects, regardless of whether those effects are objectively real or subjectively experienced. Belief, in essence, becomes the switch that turns the power on. Despite these counterarguments, the core argument remains. The Necronomicon's danger lies in its psychological impact and its ability to unlock destructive ideas and behaviors, particularly through chaos magic. Chaos magic acts as a vehicle for integrating fictional concepts into real-world practices, blurring the lines between imagination and reality. The power of belief, the fluidity of reality, and the potential for both positive and negative outcomes in chaos magic highlight the importance of self-awareness, ethical considerations, and responsible use of knowledge when engaging in these practices. The Necronomicon is not inherently dangerous, but it can be a dangerous tool in the hands of those who are not prepared to handle its psychological power. Real belief in fiction can blur the lines of reality with potentially dangerous effects. But it's not just the fictional Necronomicon we should worry about. We've explored the dangers of individual psychology, ego inflation, and the influence of fictional concepts on real-world practices. What we've learned so far is that the Necronomicon is not merely a book. It's a mirror, reflecting our deepest fears and desires, and a catalyst for unlocking the hidden potential within our minds. But what about real grimoires? Do they also hold secrets? What powers do they offer? What psychological dangers lurk within their pages, regardless of their magical efficacy? But it's not just the fictional Necronomicon we should worry about. We've explored the dangers of individual psychology, ego inflation, and the influence of fictional concepts on real-world practices. What we've learned so far is that the Necronomicon is not merely a book. It's a mirror reflecting our deepest fears and desires and a catalyst for unlocking the hidden potential within our minds. But what about real grimoires? Do they also hold secrets? What powers do they offer? What psychological dangers lurk within their pages, regardless of their magical efficacy? While the Necronomicon remains safely confined to the realm of fiction, many cultures throughout history have possessed books that act in a similar manner, acting as potential triggers with equally disturbing effects. This brings us to the shadowy world of grimoires, and we must ask ourselves, are these texts capable of causing psychological harm, irrespective of their magical potency? Prepare yourself, because this section will explore specific examples of grimoires, dissecting their contents and analyzing their potential to unleash a cascade of dark thoughts, unsettling obsessions, and even destructive behaviors in the unprepared mind. To understand the true nature of these potential dangers, we must first journey back in time, tracing the origins of grimoires to the ancient magical traditions that birthed them. These texts, steeped in esoteric knowledge and shrouded in secrecy, proliferated throughout the Middle Ages and Renaissance, becoming both feared and revered in equal measure. Grimoires served as manuals for a wide array of occult practices, from the performance of complex ritual magic to the art of summoning demons and angels. They promised access to forbidden knowledge and the acquisition of immense power, attracting those who sought to transcend the limitations of the mundane world. Figures such as alchemists, astrologers, ceremonial magicians, and various occultists avidly studied and guarded them. Historically, these books were not openly available, but instead closely guarded and passed down through initiates. What secrets did these books contain that demanded such secrecy? And what made them so alluring to those who sought power and understanding beyond the veil of the known? Before we delve further into specific examples, it is crucial to define what exactly constitutes a grimoire. Quite simply, a grimoire is best understood as a textbook of magic, a practical guide containing detailed instructions for various magical practices. These practices could range from the creation of charmed objects and the performance of spells to the casting of divinations and the summoning of spirits, both benevolent and malevolent. The knowledge contained within these ancient texts is diverse and multifaceted, encompassing rituals, incantations, sigils, symbolic representations of spirits or entities, seals used to bind or control spirits, and recipes for potions and elixirs. Each section within a grimoire serves a specific purpose, providing the practitioner with the necessary tools and knowledge to achieve their desired magical results. A typical grimoire is carefully structured, often divided into distinct sections, chapters, and appendices, each dedicated to a specific aspect of magical practice. It is important to remember that a grimoire is not simply a collection of spells. It is a comprehensive system of magic, a framework for understanding and interacting with the hidden forces of the universe. But are grimoires inherently evil? Do they grant unlimited power to those who possess them? Or is there something more subtle and perhaps more dangerous at play? To illustrate the potential psychological impact of grimoires, let's examine a few specific examples, highlighting passages or rituals that could be particularly harmful to the unprepared mind. Consider the Key of Solomon, an influential grimoire attributed to the biblical King Solomon. This text contains elaborate rituals for summoning and controlling spirits, promising the practitioner the ability to command demons and gain access to their hidden knowledge. Imagine an individual, struggling with feelings of powerlessness and inadequacy, becoming obsessed with the idea of controlling demonic forces. The intricate rituals, demanding precise actions and unwavering focus, could easily fuel a descent into paranoia and delusion, blurring the line between fantasy and reality. Then there's the Lesser Key of Solomon, also known as the Lemegeddon, details the evocation of 72 demons. The exhaustive descriptions of infernal hierarchies and the meticulous instructions for binding these entities could lead to a distorted worldview, where the practitioner perceives threats and conspiracies at every turn, questioning the motives of even their closest allies. Another notable example is the Grimorium Verum, a grimoire that focuses on making pacts with demons to gain wealth, power, or other worldly desires. The rituals described in this text often involve elaborate sacrifices and the invocation of dark forces, potentially appealing to individuals with unchecked ambition and a willingness to sacrifice their own well-being for personal gain. Envision an individual driven by greed or a thirst for power, entering into a demonic pact, believing they can control the forces they are unleashing. The consequences of such an act could be devastating, leading to self-destruction, moral decay, and a complete loss of control. Finally, we turn to the Book of Abramelin, which emphasizes the intense spiritual preparation required for the Abramelin operation, a lengthy and demanding ritual designed to invoke one's holy guardian angel and achieve spiritual enlightenment. The arduous nature of this operation, requiring months of isolation, prayer, and meditation, could easily trigger a psychological breakdown in individuals who are unprepared for such an intense experience. What happens when a person seeking spiritual enlightenment loses their grip on reality, descending into madness and despair? Such are the risks of unprepared experimentation. But how can these ancient texts, filled with archaic language and seemingly outlandish rituals, truly affect the minds of those who study them, even if they are skeptical of their magical claims? The answer lies in the powerful psychological impact of engaging with dark or disturbing content, which can manifest in various ways, from nightmares and anxiety to intrusive thoughts and obsessive behaviors. The symbolic language, metaphorical imagery, and culturally specific beliefs found in grimoires can be easily misinterpreted, leading to distorted perceptions of reality and the amplification of pre-existing psychological vulnerabilities. The themes of ego inflation, shadow work, and loss of control, which are often present in grimoires, can further exacerbate these vulnerabilities, pushing individuals towards a dangerous path. Certain entities described within grimoires can even act as negative reflections of the self, embodying repressed desires, fears, and traumas, potentially triggering a descent into the darkest corners of the human psyche. Imagine reading descriptions of entities that encourage the most negative aspects of your personality. Would you be able to separate this from your daily life? It's important to acknowledge that not everyone who reads grimoires will be psychologically harmed. Some may find them to be valuable sources of historical or cultural information, while others may view the rituals described within them as a form of symbolic self-expression or personal empowerment. Responsible scholarship, critical thinking, and a healthy dose of skepticism are essential when approaching these texts. Furthermore, consulting with experienced practitioners or scholars is crucial, especially for those who are new to the occult, as they can provide valuable guidance and prevent potentially harmful misinterpretations. It should also be noted that rituals themselves hold power beyond the grimoire. The very act of performing a ritual requires focus and intent, which can bring one closer to the intended goal. So, what is the true danger of grimoires? Despite these counterarguments, the central idea remains. The true danger of grimoires lies not in their magical efficacy, but in their psychological impact and their potential to unlock destructive ideas and behaviors in vulnerable individuals. Responsible scholarship, critical thinking, and self-awareness are paramount when engaging with these texts, recognizing their potential to influence the human psyche, regardless of their magical authenticity. Grimoires, in and of themselves, are not inherently dangerous. Rather, it is the reader's interpretation and internalization of their teachings that poses the greatest risk. Knowledge, after all, is a powerful tool, but like any tool, it can be used for both constructive and destructive purposes. When wielded by those who are unprepared or unbalanced, it can lead to devastating consequences. Grimoires should therefore be approached with caution and respect, recognizing their potential to unleash the hidden forces within the human mind, for better or for worse. So, we've explored the dangers of the Necronomicon and real-world grimoires. But what happens when belief takes over? We've discussed the potential dangers of individual psychology, ego inflation, and the influence of fictional concepts on real-world practices. We've also discovered that grimoires, despite not inherently dangerous, can still cause serious issues to individuals not properly prepared to interact with the ideas they represent. But how can a belief create real-world effects? What role does faith play in the occult, and are there rituals so dangerous that if performed incorrectly, they could trap you in an endless cycle of terror? So, we've explored the dangers of the Necronomicon and real-world grimoires. But what happens when belief takes over? We've discussed the potential dangers of individual psychology, ego inflation, and the influence of fictional concepts on real-world practices, discovering that grimoires, despite not inherently dangerous, can still cause serious issues to individuals not properly prepared to interact with the ideas they represent. But how can a belief create real-world effects? What role does faith play in the occult, and are there rituals so dangerous that, if performed incorrectly, they could trap you in an endless cycle of terror? Throughout history, faith and belief have been cornerstones of religious and spiritual traditions, shaping human experience in profound ways. From the miracles attributed to saints in Christianity to the healing practices of shamans in indigenous cultures, the power of belief has been credited with extraordinary phenomena. Consider the accounts of Lourdes, where countless individuals have claimed miraculous cures, or the practice of faith healing, where individuals are purportedly healed through prayer and spiritual intervention. Whether these phenomena are attributed to divine intervention, the power of suggestion, or the placebo effect, the role of belief in shaping reality cannot be denied. But what is the mechanism behind this power? And how does it manifest in the context of occult practices? To understand the role of belief in occult practices, we must delve into the historical development of ritual magic. Tracing its origins to ancient shamanic traditions, we find that ritual magic has evolved over millennia, taking on diverse forms and expressions across cultures. From the elaborate ceremonies of ancient Egypt to the complex systems of ceremonial magic developed in the Middle Ages and Renaissance, Ritual has served as a means of connecting with the divine, influencing the course of events, and transforming the self. Intention, visualization, and emotional intensity are all crucial components of ritual magic, and these practices emphasize the practitioner's state of mind. The placebo effect, where belief in a treatment can lead to actual physiological changes, demonstrates the power of belief to influence physical and psychological outcomes. Could this effect be amplified in the context of ritual magic, where practitioners consciously cultivate specific beliefs and expectations? Furthermore, the concept of group consciousness, where shared beliefs can create collective realities, suggests that rituals performed by groups may be even more powerful than those performed by individuals. But how does all this apply to the Necronomicon? Ritual can be defined as a structured sequence of actions, words, and symbols performed with a specific intention or purpose. Rituals can be seen as a symbolic language, a way of communicating with the unconscious mind and tapping into deeper levels of awareness. Every component contributes to the overall effect. The setting, a sacred space, a natural environment, a darkened room, the tools, wands, swords, chalices, incense, the participants, individuals, groups, initiates, the words, incantations, prayers, affirmations, and the actions, gestures, movements, dances. Rituals can create altered states of consciousness by engaging multiple senses, focusing attention, and disrupting ordinary patterns of thought. Specific emotions are evoked through music, chanting, and dramatic performance, which serve to amplify the practitioner's intention and create a sense of heightened reality. All of these different parts play a role in creating the effects that will follow the ritual. To illustrate the potential psychological effects of rituals, let's examine some specific examples from grimoires and other occult texts. The Lesser Key of Solomon details elaborate evocation rituals designed to summon and control demons. Consider the psychological toll of repeatedly invoking these entities, confronting their terrifying visages, and attempting to bind them to one's will. The constant exposure to such imagery could easily lead to a distorted worldview, where the practitioner becomes increasingly paranoid, anxious, and detached from reality. The case of chaos magic servitors also provides a cautionary tale. These entities, created through focused intention and belief, can become autonomous forces, capable of influencing the practitioner's life in unexpected ways. What happens when the practitioner's belief in the servitor wanes? According to some accounts, the servitor may turn on its creator, becoming a destructive force that is difficult to control. Now, let's consider real-world accounts of rituals gone wrong. History and occult lore are filled with stories of practitioners who have suffered psychological breakdowns, obsessions, or even perceived paranormal phenomena as a result of performing rituals without proper knowledge or preparation. The psychological phenomenon of ritualistic behavior further illustrates the power of ritual to shape human behavior. While ritualistic behavior can be beneficial, such as coping with stress or anxiety, it can also be harmful, leading to obsessive-compulsive disorder and other mental health problems. But where does the line exist between healthy ritual and harmful ritual? What separates a helpful coping mechanism from an activity that can quickly destroy a person's life? The power of belief and expectation can shape the outcome of a ritual, regardless of its objective validity. If a practitioner firmly believes that a ritual will bring about a specific result, their belief can act as a self-fulfilling prophecy, influencing their thoughts, emotions, and actions in ways that make the desired outcome more likely. Rituals can provide a framework for understanding and interacting with the world, offering a sense of meaning and purpose that may be lacking in everyday life. However, it is crucial to avoid becoming overly attached to rituals, as this can lead to dependence, rigidity, and a loss of spontaneity. The concepts of ego inflation and shadow work also play a significant role in how rituals are performed and interpreted. If a practitioner's ego becomes inflated, they may overestimate their own abilities and underestimate the potential dangers of working with powerful forces. However, it's important to acknowledge that not everyone views ritual magic as a dangerous or harmful practice. Many people see it as a form of psychological self-help, a way of accessing inner resources and achieving personal growth. Rituals can be used for manipulative or harmful purposes, such as controlling others or reinforcing negative beliefs. Some individuals may find rituals to be empty or meaningless, lacking the emotional intensity or personal connection needed to be effective. But what about those who do find rituals to be effective? And what are the ethical implications of using rituals to influence others, even with the best of intentions? Despite these counterarguments, the true danger of occult practices lies in their psychological impact and their potential to unlock destructive ideas and behaviors in vulnerable individuals. When performing rituals, it is essential to approach with caution, respect, and a clear understanding of their potential psychological effects. The power of a ritual lies not in its objective validity, but in its ability to focus intention, evoke emotion, and create meaning. So, in summary, rituals can be self-fulfilling and have intended or unintended consequences. The risk lies not in the tools, but the way we use them. So, we've seen how belief and ritual can be dangerous. But what if these practices open doors to something else? We've now explored the potential dangers of belief and ritual and how they can lead to unintended consequences. We've seen how rituals can become a self-fulfilling prophecy, shaped by the practitioner's beliefs and expectations. But do these rituals open you to external influences? Could they create a vulnerability within the mind, making it susceptible to forces beyond our comprehension? In the next section, we'll delve into the disturbing possibility that occult practices may create avenues of attack, leaving practitioners vulnerable to entities or energies that can prey on their weaknesses and exploit their fears. So, we've seen how belief and ritual can be dangerous, and how, depending on the mental state of the practitioner, these can have both intended and unintended consequences. But what if these practices open doors to something else? We've now explored the potential dangers of belief and ritual, and considered whether poorly prepared practitioners can be harmed by these ideas and actions. But do these rituals open you to external influences? Could they create a vulnerability within the mind, making it susceptible to forces beyond our comprehension? Throughout history, cultures across the globe have harbored beliefs in spirit possession, demonic influence, and various forms of external mental intrusion. These beliefs, far from being relegated to the distant past, persist in many societies today, shaping how people understand and respond to mental illness, unusual experiences, and perceived threats. In many indigenous cultures, shamans and healers are called upon to diagnose and treat spirit possession, employing rituals, prayers, and offerings to appease or exorcise the offending entities. Across the world, in ancient Greece, the concept of demonic influence was intertwined with mental states. But how did these cultures attempt to guard against such unseen forces, and what lessons might we learn from their beliefs and practices? Protective measures against these influences have varied widely across cultures, reflecting diverse belief systems and social structures. Amulets, talismans, and sacred symbols are often employed to ward off evil spirits, while rituals of purification and cleansing are performed to restore balance and harmony. In some traditions, individuals seek the protection of guardian spirits or deities, while in others, they rely on the expertise of shamans or priests to mediate between the human and spirit worlds. But what happens when these protections fail, or when individuals deliberately seek contact with these forces? Accounts of alleged demonic possession, while often viewed with skepticism in modern Western societies, continue to be reported around the world. These accounts typically involve a range of symptoms, including changes in personality, unusual behaviors, physical ailments, and the manifestation of strange voices or abilities. But how do we distinguish between genuine cases of external influence and the symptoms of mental illness? What role does cultural context play in shaping these experiences? Mind vulnerability can be defined as a state of increased susceptibility to external influences, whether those influences are psychological, emotional, or potentially even paranormal. This vulnerability can arise from a variety of factors, including stress, trauma, mental illness, sleep deprivation, drug use, and social isolation. Prolonged meditation, sensory deprivation, and the use of psychoactive substances, all of which are sometimes components of occult practices, can alter brain function and increase mind vulnerability. But what about the concept of psychic attack? How does this concept work within occult traditions, and how does it differ from mere suggestibility or psychological manipulation? Openness and mind vulnerability might seem like similar concepts, but it is important to emphasize the difference. Openness to new experiences and perspectives is a virtue, fostering creativity, empathy, and personal growth. Mind vulnerability, on the other hand, is a state of diminished mental resilience, making an individual susceptible to harmful influences. The key difference lies in discernment. An open mind can critically evaluate information, while a vulnerable mind is more likely to accept it uncritically. To illustrate how specific entities from folklore or mythology are believed to influence the human mind, let's consider a few examples. Incubi and succubi, for instance, are said to invade dreams and manipulate sexual desires, leading to psychological distress and relationship problems. Jinn are known as shape-shifting entities that whisper suggestions into the minds of humans, resulting in paranoia, delusion, and destructive behaviors. Shadow people, often described as dark, fleeting figures seen in peripheral vision, are viewed as modern-day manifestations of the collective unconscious, reflecting anxieties and fears about the unknown. Are these entities real, or are they merely symbolic representations of our internal struggles? Consider the case of Sarah, a young woman who became fascinated by the Necronomicon and began practicing rituals described in its pages. Over time, Sarah became increasingly withdrawn, paranoid, and convinced that she was being targeted by malevolent entities. She experienced vivid nightmares, heard voices whispering in her ear, and felt a constant sense of dread. Her relationships with friends and family deteriorated as she became consumed by her occult beliefs. But could Sarah's experiences be explained by mental health issues, or was she truly under the influence of something more sinister? These entities, whether real or imagined, can be interpreted as psychological projections or manifestations of repressed desires, fears, or traumas, reflecting the individual's internal conflicts. If an individual already struggles with low self-esteem, entities such as the jinn might exacerbate these feelings, leading the person to withdraw from society and engage in self-destructive behaviors. The belief in external influence can become a self-fulfilling prophecy, leading to increased anxiety, paranoia, and a distorted perception of reality. How much of Sarah's experience was influenced by her belief in the Necronomicon, and how much was due to underlying psychological factors? It is important to acknowledge that the existence of external mental influences is a matter of debate, and that many people view such beliefs as superstition or delusion. When encountering unusual experiences, it is crucial to rule out other potential explanations, such as mental illness, drug use, or environmental factors. Some individuals may find the belief in spirit guides or guardian angels to be a source of comfort and empowerment, while others may find it to be disempowering or even harmful. How can we strike a balance between respecting diverse beliefs and promoting critical thinking? Despite these counterarguments, it is crucial to understand the potential risks associated with dabbling in the occult without proper knowledge or preparation. The danger of occult practices lies in their psychological impact and their potential to unlock destructive ideas and behaviors in vulnerable individuals. The potential for belief to create avenues for attack cannot be overstated, as the mind is a powerful tool that can be shaped by suggestion, manipulation, and distorted perceptions. Ultimately, a healthy mind is a protected mind, capable of discerning truth from falsehood and resisting harmful influences. But it gets even stranger. We've explored the potential dangers of mind vulnerability, psychological projections, and suggestibility, suggesting that these issues can significantly impact an individual's mental state and behavior. But is it possible to control these influences? What happens when the practitioner loses control? Do people do this on purpose? In the next section, we'll delve into the disturbing world of intentional interactions with external forces, blurring the lines between magic and madness, and exploring the terrifying consequences that can arise when practitioners seek to control the uncontrollable. So, we've seen how belief and ritual can be dangerous, and how, depending on the mental state of the practitioner, these can create vulnerabilities that could leave you open to attack. But is it possible to control these influences? Is it possible to intentionally become a conduit for something else? Why would anyone willingly open themselves to such a risk? This section explores the concept of intentional interaction with what some call the other side, focusing on practices like controlled possession and intentional channeling. These are controversial practices, often shrouded in secrecy and misunderstanding. We will explore the techniques involved, the potential benefits claimed by practitioners, and the very real risks of losing control, blurring the fine line between a genuine spiritual experience and a complete psychological breakdown. This is not for the faint of heart, as the path to enlightenment can quickly become a descent into madness. To understand the context of these practices, we must look to history. Throughout history, countless individuals and groups have sought contact with spirits, demons, deities, or other entities. Shamanistic traditions across the globe involve spirit journeying and possession for healing or divination purposes. These practices often involve elaborate rituals, drumming, chanting, and the use of psychoactive substances to induce altered states of consciousness. In these traditions, the shaman acts as an intermediary between the human and spirit worlds, channeling the power of the spirits to heal the sick, predict the future, or maintain balance within the community. But how did these ancient practices of spirit contact evolve into the modern understanding of channeling and controlled possession? In Western occultism, ceremonial magic practices aim to invoke and control spirits, often using elaborate rituals and incantations derived from ancient grimoires like the Key of Solomon. These practices emphasize the importance of proper training, preparation, and ethical considerations. Practitioners believe that by mastering the techniques of invocation and control, they can harness the power of spirits for personal empowerment, knowledge, or the attainment of specific goals. The history of mediumship and channeling also provides valuable insight, focusing on the techniques used to establish contact with spirits and the potential for both genuine communication and outright fraud or delusion. Traditionally, these practices were overseen by a mentor or teacher, someone who could guide the student and help them avoid the pitfalls of the spirit world. Controlled possession, or intentional channeling, can be defined as a practice where individuals attempt to invite and manage external entities within their minds or bodies for a specific purpose. Practitioners enter altered states of consciousness through various techniques, including meditation, chanting, drumming, fasting, sensory deprivation, or the use of psychoactive substances. These techniques are designed to quiet the ego and open the mind to receive external influences. However, establishing clear boundaries and safeguards is crucial to prevent unwanted influences or a complete loss of control. What happens when those boundaries are breached? The types of entities that practitioners attempt to contact vary widely, ranging from spirits of the dead and angels to demons, deities, and even extraterrestrial beings. The specific entity chosen often depends on the practitioner's belief system, goals, and the desired outcome of the channeling process. It's important to distinguish controlled possession from unwanted possession. In controlled possession, the individual maintains a degree of awareness and control, allowing the entity to speak or act through them while retaining the ability to end the contact at will. Unwanted possession, on the other hand, involves a loss of control and the potential for harmful or destructive behavior. Consider the case of voodoo practitioners who become possessed by Loa spirits during rituals. During these ceremonies, music, dance, and collective energy create a powerful atmosphere that facilitates the entry of the Loa into the bodies of the devotees. The possessed individuals, known as mounted or ridden by the Loa, exhibit distinct personality changes, mannerisms, and voices associated with the specific spirit. These possessions are generally considered beneficial, providing healing, guidance, or blessings to the community. However, maintaining control and ensuring the well-being of the possessed individual is a critical aspect of voodoo practice. Is this a genuine connection to the spirit world, or a manifestation of cultural beliefs and altered states of consciousness? Ceremonial magicians offer another example of individuals who seek to invoke and control spirits for specific purposes, such as healing, divination, or personal empowerment. These magicians undergo years of training in ritual techniques, incantations, and the use of magical tools. The Abramelin operation, for example, involves months of isolation and rigorous ritual practice to invoke one's holy guardian angel. The magician aims to establish a permanent connection with this divine entity, gaining access to spiritual knowledge and power. But what happens when a magician attempts to invoke a spirit without proper training or ethical considerations? Can hubris lead to disastrous consequences? Some individuals claim to have successfully connected with extraterrestrial entities through channeling practices, receiving messages of wisdom, guidance, or warnings about the future. These claims often involve altered states of consciousness, vivid visions, and the sensation of communicating with beings from other worlds. Consider the case of the raw material, channeled by Carla Ruckert, which discusses complex philosophical and spiritual concepts related to the evolution of consciousness. While some find these messages profound and insightful, others view them with skepticism, questioning the source and validity of the information. Can we trust the information received through channeling, or is it merely a reflection of the channeler's own beliefs and biases? Not all cases of intentional channeling or possession end positively. There are documented cases of people who lost control of themselves during these practices, falling into catatonic states, experiencing severe psychological distress, or exhibiting violent behavior. In some instances, individuals have become convinced that they are possessed by malevolent entities, leading to paranoia, delusion, and self-destructive actions. The fine line between seeking enlightenment and succumbing to madness is often blurred in these cases. What factors contribute to the loss of control, and how can practitioners minimize the risks? The psychological and spiritual implications of controlled possession or intentional channeling are complex and multifaceted. Some argue that these practices can be a powerful tool for personal transformation, allowing individuals to access hidden aspects of their psyche, connect with spiritual forces, and gain insights into the nature of reality. Others view them as a dangerous form of psychological projection, where the entities being contacted are merely manifestations of the practitioner's unconscious mind. The state of mind of the practitioner greatly influences the interaction. Ego inflation, fueled by a belief in one's own power and importance, can lead to a distorted perception of reality and an increased risk of losing control. Shadow work, the process of confronting and integrating one's darker aspects, is essential for practitioners engaging in these practices. It's also important to acknowledge the potential for these practices to be used for manipulative or harmful purposes. Individuals may attempt to use channeling or possession to control others, reinforce negative beliefs, or justify unethical behavior. The belief in external influence can be a powerful tool for manipulation, as people may be more likely to obey or believe someone who claims to be acting on behalf of a higher power. How can we distinguish between genuine spiritual guidance and manipulative tactics? It's important to acknowledge the widespread skepticism surrounding controlled possession and intentional channeling. The potential for delusion, fraud, or psychological manipulation is very real. Many unusual experiences can be attributed to mental illness, drug use, or environmental factors. It is also important to note that some individuals may find these practices to be a source of comfort, guidance, or personal empowerment, even if they are not objectively real. Even a skeptical person, under the right circumstances, can succumb to the power of suggestion and the allure of the unknown. Despite these counterarguments, it is crucial to reiterate that the danger of occult practices lies in their psychological impact and their potential to unlock destructive ideas and behaviors in vulnerable individuals. As such, self-awareness, ethical considerations, and responsible practice are essential when engaging in controlled possession or intentional channeling. These practices can be powerful tools for personal transformation, but they must be approached with caution, respect, and a clear understanding of their potential psychological effects. The intention of the practitioner is key, and their state of mind can greatly influence the outcome of these interactions. The fine line between seeking enlightenment and losing oneself in the process is a constant reminder of the risks involved. So, we've seen the dangers of intentional influence. We've seen how mind vulnerability, psychological projections, and suggestibility can come into play when a person invites other entities into their consciousness. But what happens when the thing influenced isn't a person, but something bigger? What if these forces are bigger than ourselves? Is it possible to influence groups, cultures, or even reality itself? In the next section, we'll explore the disturbing idea that belief can shape reality on a larger scale, influencing collective consciousness and potentially altering the course of history. But could the Necronomicon itself be a key to influencing these forces? So, we've seen the dangers of intentional influence. We've seen how mind vulnerability, psychological projections, and suggestibility can come into play when a person invites other entities into their consciousness. But what happens when the thing influenced isn't a person, but something bigger? What if these forces are bigger than ourselves? Is it possible to influence groups, cultures, or even reality itself? This brings us to the unsettling possibility that the Necronomicon, or any source of potent, forbidden knowledge, can be seen as a tool to tap into and manipulate collective consciousness, amplifying its power and directing its course, whether intentionally or unintentionally. This section will delve into the concept of collective consciousness itself, its potential to be influenced by occult practices, and how a belief, no matter how outlandish, can become a shared reality. What are the dangerous possibilities that arise when the levers of shared reality can be manipulated? To understand how the Necronomicon might influence collective consciousness, let's look at historical examples of the power of shared beliefs. Consider the Salem witch trials of the late 17th century. Fueled by religious extremism, social anxieties, and mass hysteria, entire communities became convinced that certain individuals were in league with the devil. Accusations spread like wildfire, leading to the unjust persecution and execution of innocent people. Propaganda, fear-mongering, and social pressure all played a role in shaping public opinion and driving the collective frenzy. Or consider the rise of Nazi Germany in the 20th century. Through carefully crafted propaganda, charismatic rhetoric, and the manipulation of nationalistic sentiment, Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party were able to seize power and mobilize the German population behind their genocidal agenda. The collective consciousness of an entire nation was twisted and manipulated, leading to unimaginable atrocities. What can these past examples teach us about the true depths of social manipulation? These historical events serve as stark reminders of the power of shared beliefs and the potential for collective consciousness to be manipulated. But what exactly is collective consciousness, and how does it function? Collective consciousness can be defined as the shared set of beliefs, ideas, attitudes, and knowledge that are common to a social group or society. It represents the totality of shared understanding that binds individuals together and shapes their perception of reality. This collective consciousness operates on multiple levels, from small groups and communities to entire nations and civilizations. It's more than just groupthink or conformity. It's a dynamic and ever-evolving force that shapes individual behavior, influences the course of history, and determines the structure of reality. This force is shaped and transmitted through shared symbols, enduring myths, deeply moving rituals, and powerful narratives passing through generations. Is it possible for these narratives to be corrupted? So, how might the Necronomicon be used to influence collective consciousness? Imagine a fictional scenario where the Necronomicon's ideas or entities begin to spread like a virus, infecting the minds of susceptible individuals and corrupting entire communities. Let's say a small group of occultists becomes obsessed with the Necronomicon and begins to perform rituals described in its pages. As they delve deeper into the book's forbidden knowledge, they start to experience vivid hallucinations, disturbing visions, and a growing sense of paranoia. Their altered states of mind, fueled by the Necronomicon's imagery and incantations, begin to influence their behavior and their interactions with others. The more deeply they descend into madness, the more rapidly their distorted beliefs spread. As the occultists share their experiences and interpretations with others, they begin to attract followers who are drawn to the book's promise of power and forbidden knowledge. The Necronomicon's ideas start to take root in the collective consciousness of the community, warping their perceptions of reality and creating a shared sense of dread and unease. This shared paranoia spirals out of control, resulting in violence, social breakdown, and mass psychosis. Like a pebble thrown into a pond, the Necronomicon's influence ripples outward, corrupting everything it touches. But is such a scenario merely a fantasy or a reflection of a deeper, more disturbing truth? Now, consider the ethical and psychological implications of manipulating collective consciousness. The potential for propaganda, social control, and the erosion of individual autonomy is immense. In a world where collective beliefs can be deliberately shaped and manipulated, how can we discern truth from falsehood? How can we protect ourselves from those who seek to control our minds and manipulate our perceptions? This is where ego inflation, shadow work, and mind vulnerability, discussed in previous sections, become critically important. Individuals who are unaware of their own psychological projections and vulnerabilities are more susceptible to manipulation and control within a collective context. This could ultimately lead to a new form of mass psychosis, where entire populations become trapped in a shared delusion, unable to distinguish between reality and illusion. Are we truly in control of our beliefs, or are we merely puppets dancing to the tune of unseen forces? However, it's important to acknowledge the complexities and uncertainties surrounding the concept of collective consciousness. Measuring or proving its existence is a daunting task. Some argue that collective consciousness is simply a form of social conditioning or cultural programming, without any inherent power or agency. Others believe that it is a real and powerful force that can shape reality itself. It's also important to recognize that collective consciousness can be a force for positive change, promoting social justice, environmental awareness, or spiritual awakening. Not all attempts to influence collective consciousness are successful, and individuals and groups can often resist or reject unwanted influences. While some succumb, others resist. The power of individual belief should never be underestimated. Despite these counterarguments, the danger of occult practices lies in their psychological impact and their potential to unlock destructive ideas and behaviors. These practices can influence not only individuals, but also entire groups or even societies through collective consciousness. The power of shared beliefs, the challenges of discerning truth from falsehood, and the importance of protecting individual autonomy within a collective context are all key considerations. Knowledge, power, and influence should be used responsibly and ethically, with a focus on promoting individual well-being and social harmony. Critical thinking, media literacy, and a commitment to truth are essential when navigating a world of competing narratives and manipulated realities. Manipulation of the collective is the greatest danger and should be avoided at all costs. So, we've seen the dangers of manipulating minds and groups. But what if that manipulation goes so far that it affects the nature of reality itself? We've summarized the potential dangers of mind vulnerability, psychological projections, suggestibility, intentional influence, and collective consciousness manipulation. But what if these forces are capable of something even more profound? What if deep-seated beliefs can actually warp reality? Is reality itself vulnerable? Can these forces change what is real? What if, through belief, reality can be altered? So, we've journeyed to the edge of reality, exploring the power of the mind and its potential to be influenced. But what if that influence extends beyond individual minds and collective consciousness, warping the very fabric of reality itself? Could the power of belief, fueled by forbidden knowledge, actually alter the physical laws of the universe, creating subjective experiences that defy objective truth? This section will delve into the mind-matter relationship, exploring the disturbing possibility that the Necronomicon, as a potent symbol of forbidden knowledge and chaos, could be a tool to destabilize reality, opening gateways to unimaginable horrors or altering the very structure of existence. To understand this unsettling proposition, we must first look back at the historical and philosophical perspectives on the relationship between mind and matter. For millennia, mystics and philosophers have pondered the connection between our thoughts, beliefs, and the physical world. In ancient mystical traditions, such as Hermeticism and Neoplatonism, the universe was seen as a mental construct, a manifestation of a divine mind. These traditions posited that human consciousness, as a microcosm of the divine, possessed the power to influence the macrocosm. In more recent times, quantum physics has challenged classical notions of objective reality, suggesting that observation and measurement play a crucial role in shaping quantum phenomena. The observer effect, quantum entanglement, and the uncertainty principle all hint at a universe where consciousness and matter are intertwined in ways we are only beginning to understand. Even consciousness studies have brought up interesting points on the mind-matter relationship. Is our reality actually as real as we believe it to be? Central to this exploration is the concept of thought forms, popularized by theosophy and other esoteric traditions. These traditions propose that concentrated mental energy, fueled by intention and emotion, can create tangible entities or influence physical events. Thought forms are essentially psychic constructs, imbued with the energy of their creators and capable of interacting with the world around them. A related idea is the holographic universe theory, which suggests that our reality is not a collection of separate objects, but a projection of information from a distant, two-dimensional surface. In this model, individual consciousness may interact with a larger, interconnected reality, influencing the holographic projection through belief and expectation. Consider, also, phenomena such as spontaneous healing, where the power of belief and positive thinking is said to overcome physical ailments, or remote viewing, where individuals claim to perceive distant locations or events through extrasensory perception. What if these phenomena aren't just anomalies, but glimpses into the true nature of reality? Then there's the Mandela effect, where large groups of people share false memories of past events, further blurring the line between objective reality and subjective experience. Are these shared memories evidence of parallel universes bleeding into our own, or simply the fluid and malleable nature of human memory and collective perception? Building upon this foundation, we must define reality warping, also known as reality tunneling, as the alleged ability of consciousness, belief, or expectation to alter the physical world or to create subjective experiences that deviate from consensus reality. It's the notion that our minds can directly influence the external world, shaping physical laws, altering timelines, or even creating alternate realities. But how might this occur? One proposed mechanism involves quantum entanglement, where two particles become linked in such a way that they share the same fate, no matter how far apart they are. Some theorists speculate that consciousness may be able to exploit quantum entanglement to influence physical events at a distance. Another possibility is morphic resonance, a concept proposed by biologist Rupert Sheldrake, which suggests that patterns of behavior and information can be transmitted across time and space through a collective memory field. In this view, strong beliefs and expectations could create morphic fields that influence the behavior of others and the unfolding of events. Intention, focus, and emotional intensity play critical roles in amplifying these effects, acting as catalysts for reality warping. The stronger the belief, the more focused the intention, and the more intense the emotion, the greater the potential for altering reality. How can we be sure that intention isn't just delusion? Our perception of reality is also shaped by our belief systems, which act as filters that reinforce certain experiences while excluding others. These belief systems are deeply ingrained in our subconscious minds, influencing our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors without our conscious awareness. They can create self-fulfilling prophecies, where our expectations shape the outcomes we experience. However, it's crucial to distinguish reality warping from delusion and mental illness. While both involve altered perceptions of reality, reality warping implies intentionality and a degree of shared experience or validation. Delusions, on the other hand, are typically idiosyncratic and lack external validation. Are reality warpers simply mentally ill people, or are they capable of influencing reality in ways that science cannot yet explain? To further illustrate the concept of reality warping, let's explore some intriguing examples. Consider the concept of tulpas in Tibetan Buddhism, where practitioners create thought forms that can become autonomous entities with their own personalities and behaviors. Through intense concentration and visualization, monks are said to create these mental constructs, which can then interact with the physical world. Similar to tulpas is the alleged real-world phenomenon of egregores, where collective thought and belief create powerful entities that can influence events and people. Egregores are said to be formed when a group of individuals focuses their energy and attention on a particular idea or goal, creating a psychic entity that embodies that intention. Examples from chaos magic rituals also provide insight into the potential for belief to alter reality. Chaos magicians often deliberately manipulate their beliefs and expectations to manifest desired outcomes, using sigils, mantras, and other techniques to bypass the conscious mind and access the subconscious. But do these rituals truly alter reality, or are they simply psychological tools that enhance focus and motivation? In fictional narratives, the Necronomicon's influence often leads to alterations in physical laws, dimensional breaches, or the creation of alternate realities. In Lovecraft stories, characters who delve too deeply into the Necronomicon's forbidden knowledge often find themselves confronted with realities that defy human comprehension, where the laws of physics are bent or broken and the boundaries between dimensions blur. The book acts as a catalyst for these transformations, unlocking hidden potential within the minds of its readers and allowing them to tap into forces beyond human control. What if the Necronomicon is not just a fictional creation, but a symbolic representation of the hidden potential within our own minds to alter reality through belief and intention? What if we could create our own realities through the power of belief? Is it possible that the multiverse is real, and that our beliefs allow us to navigate between these realities, choosing the ones that align with our deepest desires and fears? The belief in reality warping can be either empowering or disempowering, depending on the individual's intention and mindset. On one hand, it can inspire hope, resilience, and a sense of agency, empowering individuals to overcome challenges and create positive change in their lives. On the other hand, it can lead to arrogance, solipsism, and a distorted sense of self, causing individuals to believe they are omnipotent and can manipulate reality for their own selfish desires. There are also ethical implications of attempting to alter reality, considering the potential for unintended consequences and the violation of free will. If we have the power to shape reality, do we also have the responsibility to use that power wisely and ethically? Is it ever justifiable to manipulate reality for personal gain, even if it means potentially harming others? Furthermore, becoming overly attached to the idea of reality warping can lead to psychological dangers, fostering paranoia and a distorted sense of self. It is easy to fall prey to the illusion of control, believing that we can orchestrate every aspect of our lives through the power of our minds. This can lead to disappointment, frustration, and even mental breakdown when reality fails to conform to our expectations. But are these dangers enough to deter those who seek to control reality itself? considering our discussion in previous sections. Ego inflation, shadow work, and mind vulnerability can make individuals more susceptible to manipulation and control by those who claim to have mastered the art of reality warping. Those with inflated egos may be drawn to the idea of reality warping as a way to further enhance their sense of self-importance and control, making them vulnerable to manipulation by charlatans and cult leaders. Those who have not confronted their own shadow selves may project their fears and insecurities onto the world around them, creating distorted realities based on their own unresolved traumas. And those with vulnerable minds, lacking critical thinking skills and a strong sense of self, may be easily swayed by the promises of reality warping, becoming pawns in the hands of those who seek to exploit their beliefs. However, it's important to acknowledge that the existence of reality warping is a highly controversial topic, lacking scientific consensus and empirical evidence. While there have been numerous anecdotal accounts and subjective experiences reported, there is no definitive proof that consciousness can directly alter physical reality. Many alleged examples of reality warping can be explained by natural phenomena, coincidence, or psychological factors, such as confirmation bias, selective perception, and psychological suggestibility. Confirmation bias leads us to selectively focus on evidence that supports our beliefs while ignoring evidence that contradicts them. Selective perception causes us to perceive the world in ways that are consistent with our expectations. And psychological suggestibility makes us more susceptible to the power of suggestion, causing us to believe things that are not necessarily true. What if reality can't be changed? What does it mean to try to change it? Despite these counterarguments, the danger of occult practices lies in their psychological impact and their potential to unlock destructive ideas and behaviors, emphasizing the ultimate possibility that belief can alter the nature of reality itself. The power of belief, the mysteries of consciousness, and the ethical considerations of manipulating reality are all key aspects to consider. Knowledge, power, and influence should be used responsibly and ethically, with a focus on promoting individual well-being and social harmony. It is essential to ground oneself in reality and maintain a connection to objective truth, even when exploring the most esoteric and mind-bending concepts. Furthermore, trying to change reality may be dangerous even if success is impossible. So, we've journeyed to the edge of reality, exploring the potential dangers of mind vulnerability, psychological projections, suggestibility, intentional influence, collective consciousness manipulation, and even the possibility of reality warping itself. We've seen how belief can corrupt and control. But what does this all mean? What is the final conclusion? And how can you protect yourself from the Necronomicon? Is the Necronomicon a path to enlightenment or a descent into madness? These are the questions we must now answer as we approach the final conclusion. So, while the manipulation of reality itself remains a topic of intense debate, there's a far more tangible form of influence that affects us all: the power of suggestion and control exerted within groups. What if, regardless of whether reality is truly malleable, groups of people act as if it is, creating closed systems of belief that can profoundly impact the lives of their members? This is where the dark allure of the Necronomicon finds a chilling parallel in the behavior of cults and high-demand groups, organizations that, often unknowingly, utilize principles akin to those found within its fictional pages to control and manipulate their followers. This section will explore how the themes and principles associated with the Necronomicon mind, vulnerability, reality warping, and the allure of forbidden knowledge are disturbingly evident in the tactics employed by these groups, revealing how they weaponize the very minds of their members. To truly grasp the extent of this influence, we must first consider the long and unsettling history of cults and high-demand groups throughout human civilization. From ancient mystery religions to modern-day extremist organizations, these groups have consistently demonstrated the power of charismatic leadership, intense indoctrination, and psychological manipulation. Consider the Thuggee cults of India, who for centuries terrorized travelers with their ritualistic killings, fueled by a twisted devotion to the goddess Kali. Or the Children of God, a modern-day cult that employed sexual manipulation and exploitation as a means of control. Throughout history, cult leaders have masterfully used fear, manipulation, and psychological coercion to maintain absolute power over their followers, creating alternative realities within which their members are isolated from outside influences and bound to the group's ideology. This constant barrage of indoctrination, social pressure, and often outright abuse rewrites the very fabric of their followers' minds. The use of propaganda, thought reform, often referred to as brainwashing, and coercive persuasion techniques are hallmarks of cult settings, effectively dismantling an individual's sense of self and replacing it with the cult's twisted version of reality. But how can we relate these groups to the Necronomicon, a fictional book of forbidden knowledge? The answer lies in the Necronomicon's ability to exert a psychological pull, a power over those who seek its secrets, mirroring the cult leader's grip on their followers' minds. Before delving deeper, it's crucial to define exactly what we mean by cult and high-demand group. These terms refer to social structures that exert undue influence over their members' thoughts, emotions, and behaviors, often employing manipulative tactics to achieve and maintain control. A cult, in its most destructive form, is characterized by a charismatic leader who demands absolute obedience, isolation of members from outside influences, family, friends, dissenting information, intense indoctrination that promotes a rigid, often bizarre belief system, thought control techniques that suppress critical thinking, and exploitation of members for the benefit of the leader or the group. The process of cult recruitment and indoctrination typically unfolds in stages, beginning with initial contact, often disguised as friendship or an invitation to a seemingly harmless event. As the individual becomes more involved, they are gradually isolated from their former life, subjected to intense indoctrination sessions, and pressured to conform to the group's norms. This coercive persuasion, or thought reform, aims to break down an individual's existing belief system and replace it with the cult's ideology, effectively creating a new identity that is subservient to the group's goals. It is, however, important to distinguish between legitimate spiritual or philosophical groups that offer support and community and destructive cults that seek to control and exploit their members. But where does the line lie? To understand how these groups function, let's examine some specific examples and analyze how they utilize principles that eerily echo the dark themes of the Necronomicon. Consider the Heaven's Gate cult, led by Marshall Applewhite, who convinced his followers that they needed to shed their earthly bodies to ascend to a higher plane of existence aboard a spaceship trailing the Hale-Bopp comet. Through a shared belief system, intense isolation, and the promise of transcendence, Applewhite persuaded his followers to commit mass suicide. Then there's NXIVM, led by Keith Raniere, who created a hierarchical power structure disguised as a self-help organization. Raniere and other leaders utilized manipulative tactics, including blackmail and sexual exploitation, to control and abuse female members. Or consider the Manson family, where Charles Manson held absolute sway over his followers, convincing them to commit heinous acts of violence in the name of a twisted ideology. These are just a few examples of how cults can exert mind control. These groups weaponize mind vulnerability, reality warping, and collective consciousness manipulation. Cult leaders often present themselves as having access to secret knowledge or special powers, mirroring the allure of the Necronomicon. The cult environment is carefully constructed to weaponize the fears and desires of its members, exploiting their vulnerabilities to gain control. But how exactly? By creating an us versus them mentality, the cult isolates its members from outside influences, reinforcing their dependence on the group and its leader. This manipulation of reality, creating a world where only the cult's beliefs are valid, mirrors the Necronomicon's power to distort perception and unlock hidden dimensions of reality. The themes and principles associated with the Necronomicon can be seen as a reflection of the psychological dynamics at play in cults and high-demand groups. The pursuit of forbidden knowledge, the allure of power, and the fear of the unknown can be exploited by cult leaders to manipulate their followers. Those drawn to the Necronomicon, in both its fictional and metaphorical forms, often seek a deeper understanding of the universe, a sense of control over their lives, or a connection to something greater than themselves. Cult leaders exploit these desires, offering their followers a distorted version of enlightenment that ultimately leads to control and exploitation. The very act of escaping a cult can be fraught with danger, as former members are often left psychologically scarred, vulnerable to further manipulation, and struggling to reintegrate into society. The individual's journey to rediscover reality becomes a dangerous path filled with uncertainty and fear. However, it's crucial to acknowledge that not all alternative belief systems or unconventional groups are inherently harmful. Some may provide genuine support, community, or spiritual growth for their members. It's also important to respect individual autonomy and freedom of thought, even when those beliefs differ from mainstream perspectives. Furthermore, some individuals may choose to participate in cults or high-demand groups willingly, finding meaning and purpose in their involvement, even if those choices seem misguided from an outside perspective. It is essential to maintain a balance between protecting individual freedom and safeguarding vulnerable individuals from manipulation and abuse. Therefore, critical thinking, independent research, and seeking outside perspectives are crucial when evaluating unfamiliar groups or belief systems. But how do we determine when a group crosses the line from unconventional to dangerous? Despite these nuances, the danger of occult practices lies in their psychological impact and their potential to unlock destructive ideas and behaviors. The alarming parallels between the Necronomicon's themes and the manipulative tactics employed by cults emphasize the importance of critical thinking, independent thought, and protecting individual autonomy in the face of undue influence. Knowledge, power, and influence should be used responsibly and ethically, with a focus on promoting individual well-being and social harmony. It is therefore vital to be aware of the tactics used by cults and high-demand groups and taking steps to protect oneself and others from their influence. Cults utilize the theories of mind vulnerability, reality warping, and collective consciousness to manipulate their members. So, how can we protect ourselves from these influences? The potential dangers of cults and high-demand groups are evident, leaving one to wonder what steps can be taken for self-preservation. But what are the warning signs? How can you protect yourself from these dangers? And is it really possible to inoculate your mind against the Necronomicon's influence and the tactics employed by those who seek to control your thoughts? We must now arm ourselves to combat these potential attacks. Having explored the potential for mind vulnerability and manipulation, as well as the dangers of reality warping within cults and high-demand groups, it would be easy to assume that the Necronomicon and its associated ideas leave us defenseless. But is that truly the case? Is it possible to build psychological defenses against such influences, to inoculate the mind against harmful ideas before they take root? The answer, perhaps surprisingly, is yes. This section will explore practical strategies for protecting oneself from the psychological dangers associated with the Necronomicon and similar concepts, offering actionable steps that can be taken to safeguard mental well-being. We will explore how mental resilience can be cultivated through specific practices and techniques, empowering you to navigate the treacherous landscape of forbidden knowledge with caution and discernment. To understand how we can defend ourselves, let's turn to historical examples of practices aimed at mental and spiritual protection across different cultures and time periods. Consider the ancient philosophical traditions like Stoicism and Buddhism, which placed a strong emphasis on emotional regulation, mindfulness, and cognitive restructuring. The Stoics, for example, advocated for accepting what we cannot control, focusing instead on our own thoughts and actions. This philosophical approach equipped individuals to remain resilient in the face of adversity, preventing external events from dictating their inner state. Similarly, Buddhist practices like meditation and mindfulness aim to cultivate present moment awareness, allowing practitioners to observe their thoughts and emotions without judgment, preventing them from being swept away by negative feelings or intrusive thoughts. These ancient traditions offered frameworks for building inner strength and resilience, providing individuals with the tools to navigate life's challenges with equanimity. Furthermore, many religious and spiritual traditions have developed practices designed to ward off evil spirits, negative energies, or unwanted influences. Prayer, meditation, visualization, and the use of protective symbols or amulets are common across cultures. In some traditions, specific rituals are performed to cleanse spaces of negative energies or to create a protective barrier around individuals. These practices, while often rooted in specific belief systems, share a common goal: to fortify the mind and spirit against external threats, creating a sense of safety and empowerment. Each of these relied on discipline and knowledge to be effective, suggesting that mental and spiritual protection is not merely a passive process, but an active engagement with one's own inner landscape. The knowledge provides context, while the discipline helps one apply that knowledge. This leads us to the core concept: psychological inoculation. Psychological inoculation can be defined as the process of building mental resilience by exposing oneself to weakened or diluted forms of potentially harmful ideas or influences, thereby developing the ability to resist them more effectively in the future. Think of it like a vaccine, but for the mind. Just as a vaccine introduces a weakened form of a virus to stimulate the immune system, psychological inoculation exposes you to potentially harmful ideas in a controlled environment, allowing you to develop cognitive antibodies that can protect you from their negative effects. This involves building different layers of defense, including critical thinking skills, emotional regulation, and self-awareness. What are these layers exactly? How do they work? Critical thinking skills empower you to analyze information objectively, identify biases, and evaluate evidence before accepting it as true. This involves questioning assumptions, seeking out diverse perspectives, and demanding evidence-based reasoning. Emotional regulation provides the capacity to manage your emotions effectively, preventing them from overwhelming rational thought and decision-making. This involves developing self-awareness, practicing mindfulness, and learning techniques for managing stress and anxiety. Self-awareness involves a deep understanding of your own values, beliefs, and psychological vulnerabilities, allowing you to recognize and address potential sources of manipulation or influence. This requires honest self-reflection, introspection, and a willingness to confront your own biases and blind spots. But how does this apply to the Necronomicon? Psychological inoculation can be specifically applied to protect yourself from the negative effects of the Necronomicon and other occult practices. Fear, obsession, and delusion are some of the dangers that one must consider. By confronting your fears in a controlled manner, you can reduce their power and prevent them from being exploited by others. This might involve gradually exposing yourself to imagery or ideas that trigger your anxiety, while practicing relaxation techniques to manage your emotional response. By practicing mindfulness and emotional regulation, you can prevent intrusive thoughts and desires from taking over your mind. This might involve techniques like meditation, deep breathing exercises, or cognitive restructuring to challenge negative thought patterns. By developing critical thinking skills and seeking out diverse perspectives, you can avoid falling prey to irrational beliefs or distorted perceptions of reality. Is this starting to make sense? What are some strategies that can be used? How do these work? Consider these concrete strategies for shielding oneself from the Necronomicon's influence, based on the principles of psychological inoculation. First, limit your exposure. Avoid prolonged or excessive engagement with the Necronomicon or related occult content, especially if you are already feeling stressed, anxious, or emotionally vulnerable. Treat it like junk food for the mind. A little might be okay, but too much can be harmful. Second, challenge assumptions. Question the underlying assumptions and beliefs promoted by the Necronomicon, seeking out alternative perspectives and evidence-based information. Consult credible sources, engage in critical discussions, and be willing to change your mind in light of new evidence. Third, practice mindfulness. Cultivate present moment awareness and observe your thoughts and emotions without judgment, preventing them from spiraling out of control. There are practices, such as meditation, that can improve these defenses. What do these practices entail? Meditation, in particular, is known to improve these defenses. Regular meditation practice has been shown to strengthen mental resilience, promote emotional well-being, and enhance critical thinking skills. By training the mind to focus on the present moment, meditation can help you develop a greater sense of awareness and control over your thoughts and emotions, preventing you from being swept away by negative feelings or intrusive thoughts. Moreover, meditation can enhance your ability to analyze information objectively, identify biases, and evaluate evidence before accepting it as true, making you less susceptible to manipulation or influence. These strategies work psychologically by strengthening mental resilience, promoting emotional well-being, and enhancing critical thinking skills. Limiting exposure to the Necronomicon can reduce the risk of triggering negative emotions, intrusive thoughts, or obsessive behaviors. Challenging assumptions can help you break free from limiting beliefs and develop a more nuanced understanding of reality. Practicing mindfulness can promote emotional regulation and prevent you from being overwhelmed by fear, anxiety, or other negative emotions. Seeking support can provide valuable perspective, emotional validation, and practical guidance for navigating challenging situations, reinforcing the understanding that one is not alone. By integrating these tactics, you are promoting a stronger mind that can withstand potential manipulation, a mind inoculated against the dangers of unchecked belief. However, it's crucial to acknowledge the limitations of psychological inoculation and discuss potential drawbacks, such as the risk of becoming overly skeptical or cynical. While critical thinking is essential, it's important to avoid falling into the trap of excessive skepticism, which can lead to distrust and isolation. Balance and moderation are key in applying these strategies, avoiding the temptation to become overly rigid or dogmatic in your thinking. After all, open-mindedness and a willingness to consider new ideas are also important for intellectual and spiritual growth. Psychological inoculation is not a substitute for professional mental health care, and individuals experiencing significant psychological distress should seek help from a qualified therapist or counselor. Despite these nuances, the most effective defense against the Necronomicon and other occult practices remains a combination of knowledge, critical thinking, and a balanced mind. Understanding the psychological mechanisms at play in occult practices equips one to better resist their negative effects. Mental resilience is not about building walls, but about developing the skills and resources needed to navigate a complex and challenging world with confidence, resilience, and compassion. In essence, the most effective inoculation is a healthy respect combined with healthy skepticism, preventing the allure of forbidden knowledge from turning into a descent into madness. But is that all there is to it? Knowledge, critical thinking, and a balanced mind are key to psychological self-defense. However, what are the final conclusions? What path should one take? Is the Necronomicon, ultimately, a path to enlightenment or a descent into madness? Having explored the potential for building psychological self-defenses against the Necronomicon, are mental shields truly enough? What other dangers might still lurk, even for the most prepared minds? Despite inoculation and self-awareness, the mind can still be vulnerable to external influence, particularly through specific entities and archetypes rooted in folklore and mythology. This section will explore such entities and how they could be interpreted as psychological triggers or doorways to internal vulnerabilities. Regardless of their objective reality, these entities can become self-fulfilling prophecies if one is not careful. Beliefs in spirit possession, demonic influence, and other forms of external mental intrusion have been prevalent across different cultures and time periods. In ancient Mesopotamia, for example, demons like Lilith were believed to attack pregnant women and infants, causing illness and death. Ancient Greek mythology featured entities like the Erinyes, who personified vengeance and were said to drive their victims mad with guilt. In many indigenous cultures, shamans acted as intermediaries between the human world and the spirit world, diagnosing and treating illnesses caused by spirit possession. These beliefs shaped social norms, moral codes, and cultural practices, dictating how people understood and responded to mental distress. For centuries, unusual behavior was attributed to external entities rather than internal psychological processes. How have ideas of external entities shaped social norms across various cultures? In modern times, many have shifted from literal interpretations of these entities to more symbolic or psychological understandings. Carl Jung, for instance, interpreted demons as representations of the shadow, the unconscious part of the personality containing repressed desires, fears, and instincts. This shift doesn't negate the power of these archetypes, it merely reframes them. Consider the similarities between the Islamic jinn and the Christian demons, or the Celtic fairies and the Japanese yokai. Despite cultural differences, a pattern emerges: a belief in unseen forces capable of influencing human thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. Is this merely coincidence, or does it point to a universal human experience? Mind vulnerability can be defined as a state of increased susceptibility to external influences, whether psychological, emotional, or potentially paranormal. Several factors can contribute to this state. Pre-existing mental health conditions like anxiety, depression, or trauma can weaken mental defenses, making individuals more susceptible to suggestion and manipulation. Substance abuse can impair judgment and increase suggestibility, as drugs and alcohol alter brain function and weaken inhibitions. Sleep deprivation can disrupt cognitive function and emotional regulation, making individuals more vulnerable to stress and negative emotions. Social isolation and the lack of social support can make individuals more vulnerable to manipulation, as they lack the perspective and validation of others. But can occult practices themselves contribute to this vulnerability? Occult practices, such as prolonged meditation, sensory deprivation, or the use of psychoactive substances, can alter brain function and, paradoxically, increase mind vulnerability. While meditation can be beneficial for mental health, excessive or improperly guided meditation can lead to dissociation and altered states of consciousness. Sensory deprivation can weaken reality testing and increase suggestibility, making individuals more vulnerable to external influences. The use of psychoactive substances can impair judgment, distort perception, and create altered states of consciousness, making individuals more vulnerable to suggestion and manipulation. Within some occult traditions, the concept of psychic attack is central, where it is believed that negative energy or malevolent intent can be directed towards an individual, causing harm. However, the importance of belief and expectation in the efficacy of such attacks must be highlighted. How can belief in psychic attack impact the results? Consider the folklore surrounding specific entities. Incubi and succubi are believed to invade dreams and manipulate sexual desires. This can be interpreted psychologically as the potential for psychological distress and relationship problems stemming from repressed sexuality or distorted views of intimacy. Individuals struggling with unresolved sexual trauma or negative beliefs about sex may be more vulnerable to these archetypes, projecting their internal conflicts onto external entities. Jinn, shape-shifting entities that whisper suggestions into the minds of humans, can lead to paranoia, delusion, and destructive behaviors fueled by insecurity or a lack of self-worth. Individuals with low self-esteem or a history of trauma may be more susceptible to the influence of jinn archetypes, internalizing their negative suggestions and acting on them. Shadow people, modern-day manifestations of the collective unconscious, reflect anxieties and fears about the unknown. Their ambiguity allows for projection of personal fears and anxieties, and individuals with a history of trauma or anxiety may be more likely to perceive shadow people and interpret them as malevolent entities. Are these encounters truly external, or are they manifestations of our internal states? Consider the fictionalized case of Sarah, a young woman who became convinced she was targeted by psychic attacks after dabbling in occult practices. She began experiencing vivid nightmares, intrusive thoughts, and a persistent feeling of being watched. As her anxiety escalated, she became convinced that a malevolent entity was trying to harm her. Sarah's psychological symptoms, regardless of external validity, reflected her internal state. Her history of trauma and anxiety made her more vulnerable to suggestion, and her belief in psychic attack amplified her symptoms. She became increasingly isolated and paranoid, further fueling her distress. Regardless of any objective threat, Sarah's belief in external influence became a self-fulfilling prophecy, leading to increased anxiety, paranoia, and a distorted perception of reality. Is this an argument against practicing the occult? What is the real danger here? These entities can be interpreted as psychological projections or manifestations of repressed desires, fears, or traumas. The belief in external influence can become a self-fulfilling prophecy, leading to increased anxiety, paranoia, and a distorted perception of reality, even in the absence of any objective threat. Individuals may use the belief in psychic attack or spirit possession to justify their own harmful behaviors or to manipulate others, shifting blame and avoiding personal responsibility. Ego inflation and shadow work can make individuals more vulnerable to external influences, real or imagined, by distorting their self-perception and blurring the lines between fantasy and reality. The belief in malevolent forces offers a convenient scapegoat for personal failings, hindering genuine self-reflection and growth. How does this connect with modern-day conspiracy theories, where individuals attribute complex events to shadowy cabals rather than accepting personal responsibility or acknowledging systemic issues? It's important to acknowledge that the existence of external mental influences is a matter of debate, and many people view such beliefs as superstition or delusion. Ruling out other potential explanations for unusual experiences, such as mental illness, drug use, or environmental factors, is key. Some individuals may find the belief in spirit guides or guardian angels to be a source of comfort and empowerment, providing a sense of protection and guidance. When approaching these topics, it is paramount to employ critical thinking, responsible research, and a healthy skepticism, particularly when faced with claims of external influence. But what if there are truly external forces at play, however rare or subtle they may be? The primary danger of occult practices lies in their psychological impact and their potential to unlock destructive ideas and behaviors in vulnerable individuals. Mind vulnerability plays a key role, and the potential for belief to create avenues for attack is a very real thing, regardless of objective reality. Self-awareness, critical thinking, and a balanced perspective are important when exploring these topics, recognizing the power of belief without succumbing to delusion. The mind is a powerful tool, but it can also be vulnerable to suggestion, manipulation, and distorted perceptions. The belief in external influence can have real-world consequences, even if the influence itself is purely psychological or internally generated, shaping behavior, relationships, and overall well-being. What is the solution? How do we harness this power without falling victim to its traps? But the rabbit hole goes deeper. The potential dangers of mind vulnerability, psychological projections, and suggestibility highlight the power of belief to shape reality. However, some occult practitioners intentionally seek out these external influences, blurring the lines between magic and madness. What is the point of doing this? Are these practitioners seeking enlightenment, or are they simply driven by ego, madness, or something even darker? We must now explore the minds of occult practitioners who walk on the edge of madness, examining their motivations and methods, and what dangers lie in wait for those who intentionally court the unknown. But the rabbit hole goes deeper. The potential dangers of mind vulnerability, psychological projections, and suggestibility highlight the power of belief to shape reality. But what happens when those vulnerabilities are intentionally sought after? Some occult practitioners intentionally seek out these external influences, blurring the lines between magic and madness in the pursuit of what they believe to be forbidden knowledge. Are these practitioners seeking enlightenment, or are they simply driven by ego, madness, or something even darker? We must now explore the minds of occult practitioners who walk on the edge of sanity, examining their motivations and methods, and what dangers lie in wait for those who intentionally court the unknown. Throughout history, individuals have sought contact with spirits and other entities, often with disastrous results. Cases of demonic possession, whether genuine or psychological, illustrate the potential for losing control when attempting to engage with the unseen. Consider the many accounts of exorcisms throughout history, where individuals believed themselves to be inhabited by malevolent entities, their minds and bodies ravaged by forces they could not comprehend. Shamanistic traditions, while often beneficial, also carry the risk of the shaman losing their way, succumbing to the spirits they attempt to control, resulting in madness or death. Ceremonial magic, with its complex rituals and invocations, can become a dangerous game if the practitioner is unprepared or lacks the necessary skills, opening doors that cannot be closed. Unlike today, these practices were traditionally overseen by mentors or teachers who had years of experience. Where has the guidance gone? Walking the edge can be defined as deliberately blurring the lines between reality and fantasy, intentionally inducing altered states of consciousness to gain access to hidden realms or knowledge. This often involves techniques such as prolonged meditation, sensory deprivation, fasting, sleep deprivation, and the use of psychoactive substances, all of which can significantly alter brain function and perception. The motivations driving the practitioner can vary widely. Some seek enlightenment, hoping to transcend the limitations of ordinary consciousness and achieve a higher state of awareness. Others are driven by a desire for power, believing that contact with supernatural forces can grant them abilities beyond the reach of ordinary humans. Still, others may be motivated by a macabre fascination, drawn to the dark and forbidden aspects of the occult, while some may even be driven by underlying mental health issues, seeking solace or validation in the occult. Do those who understand the risks truly know what they are risking? Consider the example of Austin Osman Spare, a British artist and occultist who developed his own unique system of magic based on sigils and automatic writing. Spare intentionally courted altered states of consciousness, using sleep deprivation and sensory overload to bypass the rational mind and tap into the unconscious. While Spare produced remarkable works of art and developed a unique philosophical system, his methods also led to periods of intense psychological distress and social isolation. He became increasingly detached from ordinary reality, living in a world of his own creation. Modern chaos magicians often adopt a similar mindset, intentionally blurring the lines between belief and disbelief, using sigils, rituals, and altered states to manipulate reality according to their will. But this approach also carries significant risks. What happens when the magician loses sight of the distinction between their intentional fantasy and objective reality? Consider the fictionalized case of Elias, a modern chaos magician who became increasingly obsessed with the Necronomicon. He began experimenting with increasingly dangerous rituals, seeking to unlock the secrets of the book and gain access to ultimate power. Elias became convinced that he was communicating with ancient entities, receiving messages and instructions that guided his actions. His behavior became increasingly erratic, marked by periods of mania, during which he believed himself to be invincible, and periods of depression, during which he was plagued by paranoia and self-doubt. Elias lost his job, alienated his friends and family, and eventually suffered a complete psychotic breakdown, requiring hospitalization. His case illustrates the very real dangers of blurring the lines between reality and fantasy, especially for individuals with pre-existing mental health vulnerabilities. Is this an extreme example? Analyzing the psychological and spiritual implications of deliberately blurring reality and fantasy reveals a complex and potentially dangerous dynamic. The pursuit of forbidden knowledge can become an addiction, driving the practitioner to seek ever more intense experiences and pushing the boundaries of their sanity. This can lead to ego inflation, where the practitioner believes themselves to be superior to others, possessing special knowledge or abilities. It can also lead to a distorted self-perception, making it difficult to distinguish between genuine insights and delusional fantasies. Shadow work, the process of confronting and integrating the darker aspects of the personality, can become a perilous undertaking without proper guidance, potentially unleashing repressed desires, fears, and traumas that overwhelm the individual. In the end, do the ends truly justify the means, or does the siren song of promised enlightenment lead to a destructive path? However, it is important to acknowledge that some practitioners may navigate this path successfully, maintaining a degree of control and avoiding the pitfalls of madness. These individuals often emphasize ethical considerations and responsible practice, employing self-protection techniques to shield themselves from negative influences and maintaining a strong connection to ordinary reality. They understand the importance of grounding themselves in everyday life, maintaining healthy relationships, and seeking professional help when needed. Yet, even with these precautions, the risks remain significant, and it is crucial to recognize that not everyone is suited for this type of work. It may be, for some, playing with fire. Is there a middle ground? Despite these counterarguments, the ultimate danger of intentionally blurring reality and fantasy lies in the psychological impact. It is crucial to prioritize self-awareness, ethics, and responsible practice when engaging with occult traditions, recognizing that these are dangerous tools for the unstable. If you are drawn to the occult, then first understand that these are dangerous tools for the unstable. The best way to avoid walking this path is to fully understand the potential dangers, prioritize mental health, seek guidance from experienced practitioners, and maintain a strong connection to ordinary reality. But remember, safety is key. Having explored the potential dangers of intentionally seeking out mind vulnerability and blurring reality, the question remains: is the Necronomicon a path to enlightenment or a descent into madness? And knowing this, what is the true, final answer? What path should one take? Having explored the potential for intentional mind vulnerability and the dangers of those who walk on the edge of reality, we now arrive at a crucial juncture. Does the ultimate danger of the Necronomicon stem from something within us, some external malevolent entity, or the terrifying interplay between the two? This is not a simple question of belief versus reality, but a far deeper exploration into the nature of forbidden knowledge and its effect on the human psyche. Be warned, the answer is as complex as it is unsettling. We will dissect the nature of the Necronomicon, not to debunk or validate its power, but to pinpoint the primary source of its potential danger. This section acts as a philosophical intersection, synthesizing all ideas. To understand the true nature of the Necronomicon's danger, we must first revisit Lovecraft's original intent. For Lovecraft, the Necronomicon was a literary device, a symbol of the vast, indifferent cosmos and humanity's insignificance in the face of it. The true horror lay not in demons or magic spells, but in the realization that we are utterly alone and irrelevant. Historically, however, the Necronomicon has taken on a life of its own, interpreted by some as a source of genuine power, a gateway to forbidden knowledge, and a tool for manipulating unseen forces. This phenomenon of attributing power to texts is not new. Scriptures, grimoires, and even impactful works of literature have been seen as holding intrinsic power, capable of influencing reality, shaping belief, and driving human action. The cultural basis for this belief stems from the human tendency to imbue symbols, words, and stories with meaning and significance, creating a feedback loop where individual interpretation shapes collective reality, influencing the mind and soul for good or ill. But what does it mean? To understand the Necronomicon's danger, we must define the internal vs external dichotomy. On the one hand, the danger may lie within us, in our psychological vulnerabilities, our biases, and our pre-existing mental states. The Necronomicon, in this view, acts as a mirror, reflecting our inner darkness and amplifying our fears and anxieties. On the other hand, the danger may be external, stemming from genuine forces or entities that are amplified by the book. In this scenario, the Necronomicon serves as a conduit, opening doors to realms beyond human comprehension and unleashing forces that can overwhelm the unprepared. However, and here is where a terrifying third option emerges, it is important to note that perhaps this dichotomy is false, that the internal and external are not separate but deeply intertwined, each influencing and shaping the other. Consider these contrasting examples. An individual with a pre-existing mental illness becomes obsessed with the Necronomicon, attributing their symptoms to demonic influence and spiraling into psychosis. This is an internal focus, where the book acts as a catalyst for pre-existing vulnerabilities. Conversely, a group of occultists attempts a ritual from the Necronomicon, experiencing disturbing phenomena, such as apparitions or unexplained noises, leading them to believe they have contacted an external entity. This represents an external focus, where the book serves as a gateway. Now imagine a skeptical person reads the Necronomicon, initially dismissing it as fiction, but then experiences nightmares, intrusive thoughts, and a growing sense of unease. This is a combination where the book interacts with the individual's subconscious, blurring the lines between reality and imagination. This mirrors real-world examples of the placebo and nocebo effects, where belief can have a tangible impact on physical and mental health. Analyzing these examples, the role of belief becomes undeniably clear. Belief acts as a lens, shaping our perception and influencing our experience. However, it is dangerous to attribute the Necronomicon's danger solely to internal factors, as this risks dismissing genuine spiritual experiences or encounters with the unknown. To disregard such accounts entirely is to limit our understanding of the vast, mysterious universe we inhabit. Yet, attributing the danger solely to external factors is equally perilous, as it absolves individuals of responsibility and ignores the power of the mind to shape its own reality. This ties back to our previous discussions on ego, shadow, and the collective unconscious. The Necronomicon, whether a conduit for external forces or a mirror reflecting inner darkness, interacts with these aspects of the self, amplifying their power and potentially leading to either enlightenment or destruction. However, it is important to acknowledge the complexity of this issue. There are no easy answers, no simple formulas for determining the source of the Necronomicon's danger. Psychological explanations have limitations, unable to fully account for the vast range of human experience and the potential for genuine paranormal phenomena. Likewise, paranormal explanations often lack scientific rigor and rely on anecdotal evidence, making them difficult to verify. It is also important to note that some individuals may find the Necronomicon to be a source of inspiration or creative insight, without experiencing any negative effects. For these individuals, the book may serve as a tool for exploring the depths of the imagination, confronting their fears, and developing a deeper understanding of themselves and the world around them. The key, it seems, is balance. Despite these counterarguments, the relationship between mind, belief, and the Necronomicon remains central to understanding its true nature. The danger of the Necronomicon, ultimately, comes from many sources, both internal and external, intertwined in ways we may never fully comprehend. It is a potent symbol of forbidden knowledge, capable of unlocking both immense power and unimaginable destruction. Knowledge, power, and influence, whether wielded responsibly or recklessly, can alter the course of a life. Therefore, a balanced perspective, one that acknowledges the power of the mind, the potential for external influences, and the importance of ethical considerations, is essential for navigating the treacherous path that the Necronomicon represents. This takes us to the final point. Knowing all of this, what is the true danger of the Necronomicon? It is the potential for unchecked ambition, the allure of forbidden knowledge, the temptation to cross boundaries that should not be crossed. It is the risk of losing oneself in the pursuit of power, of succumbing to madness, and of unleashing forces beyond human control. But knowing all of this, what path should you take? What must you consider? what are the final components in understanding the dangers of the Necronomicon? Having considered the potential for unchecked ambition, the allure of forbidden knowledge, and the temptation to cross boundaries, we arrive at another critical question. Is it possible to surrender so much control that an outside force, whether imagined or real, could take over? This section will explore the mechanics of channeling, automatic writing, and how those mechanics can relate to the Necronomicon, hinting at the disturbing possibility that a dark or negative idea can, in a sense, become external through these practices. To understand the context of these practices, we must first look at the history of channeling and automatic writing as spiritualist pursuits. From the ancient oracles of Delphi, believed to be conduits for divine pronouncements, to the Victorian seances where mediums claimed to communicate with the dead, the desire to connect with unseen realms has been a recurring theme throughout human history. Consider the Ouija board. Initially marketed as a harmless parlor game, it quickly gained a cultural perception as a portal to the unknown, a tool for automatic writing that could bypass conscious control and tap into spiritual forces. The late 19th century witnessed the rise of spiritualism, a movement that swept across Europe and America, fueled by the belief that the living could communicate with the spirits of the deceased. This perceived connection to the spiritual realm offered solace to many, but also opened doors to potential manipulation and psychological vulnerability. These concepts were not limited to spiritualist circles. Automatic writing also found its way into artistic and literary movements, such as surrealism, where artists sought to bypass conscious thought and tap into the creative power of the unconscious mind, creating a diverse range of proponents across many cultures and communities. But what are these practices? Channeling can be defined as the purported communication with external entities, be they spirits, deities, or even extraterrestrial beings, with the channeler acting as a vessel for their messages. Automatic writing, closely related, is a process where a person writes without conscious effort, often believing that the words are coming from an external source. The source of this writing is often interpreted in many ways, from spirits and the unconscious mind to the collective unconsciousness or Jungian archetypes. The question then becomes, how does the Necronomicon fit into this equation? The Necronomicon, as an idea, a potent symbol of forbidden knowledge, could be perceived as an entity in itself, influencing automatic writing, guiding the pen, and shaping the messages that emerge from the subconscious. This is distinct from more extreme forms of possession, where an entity is believed to take complete control of a person's body, speech, and actions. Consider the examples. There have been individuals throughout history who have claimed to channel information directly inspired by the Necronomicon, reporting vivid visions, disturbing messages, and instructions for rituals they felt compelled to perform. Even Lovecraft's stories themselves can be viewed as a form of automatic writing, tapping into deep-seated anxieties about the cosmos and humanity's place within it. Imagine a fictionalized case study. A young writer becomes fascinated by the Necronomicon and begins experimenting with automatic writing, initially producing harmless, even creative content. However, as their obsession grows, the content becomes increasingly disturbing, filled with images of cosmic horrors, ancient entities, and rituals involving sacrifice and madness. They experience nightmares, intrusive thoughts, and a growing sense of paranoia, blurring the line between imagination and reality. This has also manifested in artists using the Necronomicon as a muse to create their works, from paintings and sculptures to music and literature, claiming that the book has opened doors to new realms of inspiration, both terrifying and sublime. Further, many occultists throughout time have engaged in channeling and automatic writing, some even claiming direct contact with entities described in the Necronomicon, often with dire consequences, including psychological breakdowns, social isolation, and even acts of violence. Analyzing these examples, what are the psychological implications of surrendering conscious control during channeling and automatic writing? The act of relinquishing control can create a vulnerability, a space where subconscious desires, fears, and anxieties can surface, unfiltered by reason or logic. The Necronomicon, as a symbol of forbidden knowledge, can become a focal point for these subconscious elements, amplifying their power and shaping the content that emerges during these practices. Automatic writing can amplify pre-existing psychological vulnerabilities, such as anxiety, paranoia, or dissociative tendencies, creating a dangerous feedback loop where the individual becomes increasingly convinced of the reality of the horrors they are channeling. This ties back to our previous discussions on mind vulnerability, the shadow, and the illusion of control. These elements converge in the practice of automatic writing, creating a dangerous cycle. The individual's desire for forbidden knowledge leads them to surrender control, which in turn amplifies their subconscious fears and anxieties, which then manifest as increasingly disturbing content, reinforcing their belief in the Necronomicon's power and further fueling their obsession. However, it is important to acknowledge that some individuals view automatic writing and channeling as harmless forms of creative expression, a way to tap into the unconscious mind and explore new ideas. Indeed, automatic writing can be a valuable tool for self-discovery, helping individuals uncover hidden emotions, process past traumas, or generate creative ideas that they would not have otherwise accessed. Not all channeling or automatic writing experiences are negative, and some individuals may find them to be empowering or enlightening, providing them with a sense of connection to something larger than themselves. Critical thinking, discernment, and responsible practice are essential when engaging in these activities. Even if the content generated is creative or insightful, it is still dangerous territory, a realm where the boundaries between imagination and reality can become blurred, and the potential for psychological harm is real. Despite these counterarguments, the core argument remains: the danger in occult practices lies in their psychological impact, especially when practices like automatic writing lead to a loss of control. Self-awareness, critical thinking, and a balanced perspective are essential for navigating these treacherous waters. These practices are powerful tools, capable of unlocking hidden potential, but they are also dangerous, capable of unleashing forces that can overwhelm the unprepared. Grounding oneself in reality, maintaining a skeptical eye, and understanding one's own psychological vulnerabilities are crucial for safe and responsible exploration. Intent and a skeptical eye are key. But what does all of this mean? We have explored the dangers of intentional vulnerability, the risks of edge walking, and the potential for loss of control through practices like automatic writing. Is the Necronomicon a door to enlightenment or to madness? And knowing this, what can you do? The answer, as we will see, lies in understanding the subtle but powerful ways in which the Necronomicon can shape our perceptions, influence our beliefs, and ultimately lead us down a path from which there may be no return. Having explored the potential for individuals to lose control through automatic writing, we are confronted with a paradox. Surrender is often presented as a path to ultimate knowledge. But if we surrender conscious command, do we not open ourselves to even greater dangers, making ourselves vulnerable to forces we cannot possibly comprehend? This section will explore the role of surrender in various occult traditions, differentiating between genuine surrender and dangerous loss of control, highlighting the subtle line between ego death and total destruction. Consider the disturbing possibility that the desire to surrender can be a trap in itself, an invitation to something far more sinister than enlightenment. Historically, surrender has been a core principle in various religious and spiritual traditions across different cultures and time periods. From the ecstatic dances of Sufi mystics to the meditative practices of Buddhist monks, the relinquishing of personal will has long been seen as a means of accessing higher states of consciousness. In shamanistic traditions, initiates often undergo ritualistic death and rebirth experiences, symbolically surrendering their old selves to make way for new spiritual identities. Consider the concept of ego death in Eastern religions like Buddhism and Hinduism, where the dissolution of the ego is seen as a prerequisite for enlightenment, a release from the illusion of self that allows one to perceive the true nature of reality. There are countless examples of individuals who sought to transcend their ego through intense spiritual practices, such as prolonged meditation, fasting, acts of self-denial, and sensory deprivation. Even in martial arts, practitioners learn to relinquish conscious control in moments of combat, allowing their bodies to react instinctively, achieving a state of no mind that enhances agility and responsiveness. However, these are all in the pursuit of mastery. These traditions hold that the ego is not inherently evil, but that it is merely a construct that prevents a person from attaining a higher state of being. But how has the ego been traditionally viewed? In many Western traditions, the ego is traditionally viewed as the center of consciousness, the I that experiences the world and makes decisions. It is seen as the source of identity, the sense of self that distinguishes an individual from others. However, many Eastern philosophies, as previously mentioned, hold a different view. They often regard the ego as an illusion, a false construct that creates a sense of separation from the rest of the universe. In this perspective, the ego is seen as the root of suffering, the source of attachment, aversion, and ignorance. By recognizing the illusory nature of the ego, individuals can transcend their limitations and experience a state of oneness with all things. This is where the danger lies. The desire to destroy the ego can often lead to madness. In the context of occultism and spirituality, surrender can be defined as the intentional relinquishing of conscious control, ego attachment, and personal will in order to access deeper states of awareness, connect with higher powers, or gain insight into hidden truths. This can manifest in various forms. Emotional surrender involves releasing emotional blockages and allowing oneself to experience a full range of feelings without judgment or resistance, a process often employed in cathartic rituals. Mental surrender entails quieting the mind and transcending analytical thought to access intuitive knowledge or spiritual guidance, a state sought after in meditative practices. Volitional surrender means subordinating one's personal will to a higher purpose, divine power, or collective goal, often seen in devotional traditions. But what happens when these practices are manipulated, twisted, or used for nefarious purposes? The intentional surrendering of the mind opens up the practitioner to potential risks. How does one differentiate genuine surrender from a psychological breakdown? Consider the examples of respected figures from various spiritual traditions who advocated for surrender as a path to wisdom, enlightenment, or divine union. Rumi, the Sufi mystic, wrote extensively about surrendering to the divine love, losing oneself in the ecstasy of union with the beloved. Saint Francis of Assisi embraced a life of poverty and humility, surrendering his worldly possessions and ego attachments to follow the teachings of Christ. The Buddha taught the path of non-attachment, encouraging his followers to relinquish their desires and aversions to achieve liberation from suffering. Yet, for every story of transformative surrender, there are counter-examples of situations where surrender led to negative consequences. History is littered with individuals manipulated by cult leaders, surrendering their personal autonomy and falling prey to indoctrination and abuse. In some extreme cases, practitioners of active surrender, in a cult, rituals seek to become vessels for entities, relinquishing control of their bodies and minds in the hope of gaining power or knowledge, often with devastating results. There are also more modern examples, such as artists who claim to surrender to the creative process, allowing their hands to move freely across the canvas, guided by forces beyond their conscious control. However, what if those forces are not benign? Analyzing these examples, we arrive at a psychological paradox. Intentionally surrendering control can be both empowering and disempowering, liberating and dangerous. Practices like meditation, trance, or automatic writing can facilitate surrender by quieting the conscious mind and opening pathways to the unconscious, but they can also create a space for manipulation and delusion. How does surrender allow individuals to access the unconscious mind, tap into collective consciousness, or connect with spiritual entities? But what happens when the Necronomicon enters the equation? How does the Necronomicon's danger lie in coaxing the reader to surrender to it, to its dark visions and forbidden knowledge? The very act of reading the Necronomicon can be seen as a form of surrender, an opening of the mind to potentially destructive forces. Consider the case of someone who becomes obsessed with the Necronomicon, allowing its narratives of cosmic horror and ancient entities to dominate their thoughts and dreams, surrendering their sense of self to the book's twisted worldview. However, it is important to acknowledge the potential dangers and complexities associated with surrender. Self-awareness, discernment, and a strong ethical framework are essential when engaging in activities that involve relinquishing control. Boundary setting, critical thinking, and responsible practice are crucial, particularly in the context of occultism or spirituality. Not all forms of surrender are inherently beneficial, and some may be detrimental to one's psychological well-being or personal autonomy. But what if surrender is inherently impossible? What if the very act of trying to surrender is an illusion, a subtle form of control in itself? Despite these counterarguments, the core argument remains. The ultimate danger of the Necronomicon and other occult practices lies in their psychological impact and their potential to unlock destructive ideas and behaviors, with the act of surrendering control being especially dangerous. Self-awareness, critical thinking, and a balanced perspective are essential when exploring such practices. These elements of surrender are powerful tools, capable of unlocking hidden potential and also capable of unleashing forces that can overwhelm the unprepared. Neither good nor bad, they simply are. So, where does this leave us? We have explored the dangers of intentional vulnerability, the risks of edge walking, and the potential for loss of control through practices like automatic writing and surrender. By coaxing an individual to be vulnerable, the Necronomicon can become a prison. Is the potential outcome of all of this a path to enlightenment or madness? What is the final answer? As we approach the ultimate conclusion, we must ask ourselves, what happens when the book is not just read, but internalized, when its dark visions become one's own? Having explored the dangers of the Necronomicon on the individual mind, we must now consider a much larger scope. What if the dangers are not confined to single minds, but resonate through history, influencing collective behavior on a grand scale? The Necronomicon, whether as a fictional construct or something more, has a legacy of inspiring dark imaginings, and some historical events bear disturbing parallels to its themes. This section will explore potential, albeit speculative, connections between historical events and themes found within the Necronomicon, emphasizing that such connections do not indicate direct causation. Rather, they reflect the book's capacity to tap into primal fears and destructive impulses that have manifested throughout history. A disturbing undercurrent of chaos and destruction seems to echo through time, regardless of the Necronomicon's literal existence. To understand how such echoes might occur, we must first examine historical examples of events driven by mass hysteria, paranoia, and violence. The witch hunts of the early modern period, fueled by religious zealotry and superstitious beliefs, offer a chilling example of how fear and misinformation can be weaponized to incite widespread persecution. Trace the historical prevalence of apocalyptic beliefs, doomsday cults, and movements that prophesied the end of the world or the rise of a new world order. Such beliefs have often been fueled by fear, uncertainty, and a desperate desire for control in the face of chaos or societal upheaval. The Black Death in the 14th century led to mass hysteria and scapegoating, and many blame the plague on the Jewish populations, while the French Revolution saw the rise of extremism that executed the King of France to create a new type of world order. Even without a book like the Necronomicon, propaganda, misinformation, and social engineering have played a devastating role in manipulating mass psychology and inciting violence throughout history. Even without the Necronomicon, history has proven that humanity is capable of some dark acts. So what if the Necronomicon simply fans these flames? To explore these speculative connections, we must consider the concept of archetypal resonance. Archetypal resonance describes how certain symbols, narratives, or themes tap into universal patterns of human experience, evoking strong emotional responses and shaping collective behavior. Carl Jung's theory of archetypes proposes that certain primordial images or patterns reside in the collective unconscious, a shared reservoir of human experience. These archetypes can be activated by specific stimuli, such as art, music, or ritual, triggering deep-seated emotions and influencing behavior. The Necronomicon, in this context, can be seen as a repository of dark archetypes, embodying primal fears, forbidden desires, and destructive impulses that resonate with individuals and societies across time and cultures. The book's imagery of ancient entities, cosmic indifference, and forbidden knowledge could be seen as catalysts for unlocking the darker aspects of the human psyche. It is also important to note the concept of synchronicity, meaningful coincidences, which might explain the apparent connections between the Necronomicon's themes and certain historical events, giving the impression of some larger pattern. However, this should be contrasted with the idea of collective psychosis, wherein large groups of people share the same delusions and irrational thoughts. Is this why so many historical events appear to echo the sentiments of the Necronomicon? Consider, for example, the Salem witch trials of the late 17th century. The paranoia, mass hysteria, and scapegoating that characterize the witch hunts reflect the Necronomicon's themes of cosmic indifference, forbidden knowledge, and the unleashing of primal forces. Accusations of witchcraft, fueled by religious extremism and social anxieties, led to the persecution and execution of innocent individuals. The accusations themselves often involved claims of secret rituals, pacts with dark forces, and the manipulation of supernatural powers, all echoing the themes present in the Necronomicon. Turning to the 20th century, the rise of Nazi Germany offers another disturbing parallel. The Nazi ideology tapped into archetypal fears and desires related to power, racial purity, and a return to a mythic past, mirroring the Necronomicon's themes of forbidden knowledge, ancient evils, and the corruption of the human soul. The Nazis employed propaganda, violence, and a twisted sense of destiny to justify their horrific actions. And who can forget the Rwandan genocide? The dehumanization, propaganda, and systematic violence that fueled the genocide reflect the Necronomicon's themes of cosmic indifference, the fragility of human morality, and the unleashing of primal instincts. These are dark events that prove, with or without the Necronomicon, humanity is capable of terrible acts. The Necronomicon, even as a work of fiction, can tap into and amplify pre-existing anxieties, fears, and destructive impulses within individuals and societies. The book's themes of cosmic indifference, forbidden knowledge, and the unleashing of primal forces can resonate with individuals who are already prone to paranoia, violence, or extremist ideologies. In this context, the Necronomicon can serve as a Rorschach test, projecting the pre-existing fears, desires, and biases of the reader. Its passages may be interpreted in ways that justify violence, reinforce prejudices, or fuel personal delusions. Considering how ego inflation, shadow work, and mind vulnerability can make individuals more susceptible to manipulation by extremist ideologies or charismatic leaders, the Necronomicon serves as a dark mirror, reflecting the potential for humanity to descend into chaos and destruction. It is important to understand how this creates self-fulfilling prophecies. If people believe that the world is inherently evil and chaotic, they are more likely to act in ways that create that reality. However, it is crucial to emphasize that drawing connections between the Necronomicon and historical events is a speculative exercise, not a claim of direct causation or influence. It is important to acknowledge the potential for confirmation bias and selective interpretation when analyzing historical events through the lens of the Necronomicon. Scholars may be tempted to cherry-pick evidence that supports their pre-existing beliefs while ignoring contradictory information. Political, economic, social, and cultural factors are alternative explanations for historical events, and it is also important to consider them. Not all individuals exposed to the Necronomicon will be negatively influenced. Some may find it to be a source of creative inspiration or intellectual stimulation. Some may even read it as a warning. So, what if there is no connection? What if these events are simply a result of human nature, independent of any external influence? Despite these counterarguments, the ultimate danger of the Necronomicon still lies in its psychological impact and its potential to unlock destructive ideas and behaviors, even while acknowledging the echoes found in history. Critical thinking, historical awareness, and a balanced perspective are essential when exploring the potential connections between the Necronomicon and real-world events. Responsible knowledge, power, and influence should always be used ethically, with a focus on promoting individual well-being and social harmony. It is also crucial to be aware of the potential for archetypal themes and narratives to shape collective behavior and influence the course of history. Knowledge of the past can prevent future issues. By studying historical events, understanding the psychology of mass hysteria, and promoting critical thinking, we can better protect ourselves from the dangers of manipulation and extremist ideologies. So, after all of this, what are we left with? We've explored the book's potential to impact individuals and potentially influence large-scale historical events. This is a terrible darkness, but we must ask, is the Necronomicon truly a path to madness, or could it be a source of knowledge? Knowing this, what are the final conclusions? What path should you take after learning all of this? As we draw our exploration of the Necronomicon to a close, we find ourselves at the end of a long, winding path, one that has led us through forbidden libraries, ancient myths, and the darkest corners of the human mind. The many paths we've explored, from Lovecraftian lore to historical echoes, converge on a central question. Is the Necronomicon merely a fictional creation, or does it hold a more sinister power, one that can unlock the destructive potential within us all? In summary, the Necronomicon's primary danger lies not in supernatural forces lurking between the pages, but in its potential to unlock destructive ideas and behaviors in those who are unprepared to confront them. We have seen how the Necronomicon can amplify pre-existing psychological vulnerabilities, turning curiosity into obsession and skepticism into paranoia. We have also seen how the power of belief, both individual and collective, can shape reality in profound and often disturbing ways, transforming a fictional book into a cultural phenomenon with far-reaching implications. And finally, we have emphasized the importance of self-awareness and critical thinking as our only true defenses against the Necronomicon's insidious influence, reminding ourselves that the greatest monsters often dwell within. The interaction between the fictional and real-world influences serves to amplify the Necronomicon's danger. Its fictional status can create a sense of safety and distance, yet its real-world influence is a constant reminder of its ability to tap into humanity's deepest fears and desires. But the Necronomicon is more than just a book. It is a mirror reflecting the universal human fascination with forbidden knowledge and the darker aspects of the human psyche. It taps into our primal fears of the unknown, our hidden desires for power, and our anxieties about the fragility of reality. To what extent do our beliefs shape our reality, turning fiction into fact and imagination into obsession? How can we balance the pursuit of knowledge with the need for self-protection, guarding ourselves against the seductive whispers of forbidden lore? And what responsibility do we have for the ideas and beliefs that we unleash into the world? Understanding that words, like curses, can have unintended and devastating consequences. Ultimately, our exploration of the Necronomicon speaks to the broader human experience of facing the unknown, confronting our inner demons, and grappling with the profound mysteries that lie beyond the realm of human understanding. As we stand at the edge of this abyss, it is essential to remember that the pursuit of knowledge and understanding is a valuable and noble endeavor, one that can lead to enlightenment and progress. However, it is a pursuit that should always be tempered with caution, humility, and a healthy dose of skepticism. For in the realm of the esoteric, the line between truth and illusion, between wisdom and madness, can often become dangerously blurred. Let the Necronomicon serve as a potent reminder that the greatest dangers often lie not in the external world, in ancient curses or supernatural entities, but within the depths of our own minds, in the unchecked power of our beliefs, and the seductive allure of the forbidden. If you're ready to explore more stories like this, uncover hidden truths, and dive deeper into the world of the arcane, don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey into the unknown. Like this video if you found it informative or thought-provoking, and share your thoughts and experiences in the comments section below. We'd love to hear from you. And be sure to activate the bell so you don't miss anything. More videos full of forbidden secrets, disturbing stories, and knowledge that challenges everything you think you know are coming. Stay curious and remember to question everything.